Welcome to Armchair Expert, experts on expert. This is a real departure from previous experts in the most exhilarating way. This was riveting.
And it's a ding, ding, ding from Monday's episode.
Yes, from Anna Kendrick, because of her new movie, Woman of the Hour. Our guest, Matt Murphy, was a technical advisor on it, as well as an actual prosecutor on the case. Matt Murphy is a former homicide prosecutor and a current legal analyst for ABC News. Maybe you've seen him there. And he spent 2 decades assigned to the sexual assault and homicide units of the Orange County District Attorney's Office, which you'll learn in this is the 3rd biggest in the country. 3 million people under their purview.
Yes.
He has tried some of the most headline-y murder cases of all time. A lot of shit was happening in Orange County that I kind of didn't realize.
Yeah, he was like Golden State Killer, a lot of them.
Dirty John.
Yeah. Oof.
He has a book out called The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death, which is fantastic. It's so good, and he profiles all these different cases he's worked on, as well as educates you a ton on how the actual mechanics of that job work, which I find fascinating, and then his own personal journey, which is this job took an enormous toll on the rest of his life.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. This was awesome. I loved Matt Murphy. I hope you do too.
Oh.
We are presented by Amazon Prime. It's more than just fast, free shipping. Whatever you're into, it's on Prime. So keep listening and watching to hear more about why we love Prime during the fact check.
He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert. He's an armchair expert.
We're pretty willy-nilly, Matt. Don't let this nice set fool you. We're kind of...
Just my speed.
Cattywampus.
Cattywampus is a good word.
Now, you're handsome. Let's start with the fact that you're very handsome.
Devilishly so.
And I'm being sincere now. It has to be a little bit of an advantage when you're a prosecutor to be handsome. It'd be preferable that the jury likes to look at you, right?
You know what's tough is for the women, pretty women prosecutors, it's brutal.
It is.
Because people don't take them seriously.
As a guy, you walk in, the bailiff's your buddy, you talk about fantasy football, the court clerk wants to set you up with her divorced friend, and a lot of the women have it tougher because half the women on the jury will want to hate her for her suit, and the court reporter is jealous.
The men feel emasculated that she's smarter than them, so they hate her on the jury.
It's a minefield.
So, Matt, this will be a fun interview for us because we've not had anyone weirdly in this realm. We've had a lot of defense attorneys on, as they tend to write books. Yeah, so we've not had a prosecutor on, and I can't tell you how immediately, how many questions I realized I had.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. First of all, you're a California native, which is weird.
Yeah, I grew up, actually, we were just talking about it, not far from here.
Really?
Actually.
Really?
Yeah, I grew up in Beverlywood.
Oh.
And
Why don't I know where Beverlywood is?
Nobody knows where it is.
It's
basically, you know where
Beverly
Rancho
Hills.
Park is by Fox Studios.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so literally it's Cheviot Hills.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the second part of Cheviot Hills on the other side of Motor.
Okay.
So it's basically Cheviot Hills.
And what did mom and dad do that you were living there?
My dad was a doctor. Mom was a nurse. Met at LA County General. I was born
that's
a cliche.
cute.
They were working together?
They were working together.
Yeah.
And it sounds cute. I don't think two humans have hated each other more. I should not exist. I just had this, I kind of nerd out on some of these astronomy things. And somebody tried to calculate the odds of humans existing with Jupiter and absorbing all the asteroids and whatever that list is, I'm the least likely person to actually exist because
How long did they stay married?
Yeah.
10 years.
10 years.
10 years. They're married for 10 years, probably talked to each other for at least one. Well, my sister is 2 years younger than me, so at least 8 years Okay.
Okay. What kind of doctor was he?
GI. He started doing rehab centers.
Okay.
He got into that. He did Exodus.
He made a lot of money doing that.
He did, and he got in in the late 80s. Was one of the pioneers. Anthony Kiedis and Scar Tissue. I don't know if you ever read that book?
I haven't, but I know Anthony and I know his story.
That's a good read. So he actually talked about my dad in that book.
Oh, he did?
Which was,
oh, my God.
What drove him maybe working in the county?
No. He's hopeless alcoholic for a long time.
Your dad was?
Both my parents,
Oh,
I'm a thoroughbred baby.
Did your dad get sober?
Yeah.
He did.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to open a treatment center.
Yeah.
Oh.
Became sort of like a passion life, big AA guy. And then, in 1975, he got a DUI. And it was undignified experience for him. And he was like a prominent dude.
Yeah.
And he like figured it out. He got sober.
Okay, so my dad got his 4th DUI. He was going to go to prison, and he went to rehab.
And it stuck?
It stuck.
With him?
Yeah, he
Good
died
for him.
sober, yeah.
Wow, yeah.
So it's an interesting experience to grow up in AA, right?
I was an AA kid. That's right.
Me too.
Really?
Did you go to like Alateen?
Made
and
me
all?
go. Made me go.
Yep.
That is so funny. Yeah, I lived with him in high school because my mom was still drinking. And it was like, and he was a legit guy, but it was like, I mean, he was all in. It was like a religion to him. I mean, like he was all in.
Was he into Course in Miracles or ACOA or all the other fringe outgrowths of the 80s AA?
ACOA?
Yeah,
Yep, sure
adult
was.
children
Yep.
of alcoholics.
Yeah. When I moved in, that was the condition. I had to go to Alateen meetings.
Matt, you've heard me say this.
Yes.
So I never lived with my dad. They got divorced when I was 3. And then in 9th grade, he had gotten in a terrible car accident and he needed someone to help him. And I was about to get murdered at the new high school I was going to go to. So many kids hated me. So I moved in with him and he said, yeah, come in. There's virtually no rules. You have no curfew, but you have to go to one meeting a week.
Holy shit, this is so funny.
And
That
so
was
I
the
started
rule.
going to like Alateen or whatever it was. He encouraged me to go to like the Al-Anon portion. I was like,
Yeah.
these aren't my folks. I'd rather be in an actual AA meeting. So I was going to AA meetings before I ever had a
kidding.
problem. I ultimately did have a big problem. But yeah.
So I moved in 9th grade. That was the rule. No curfew, no nothing. I had to go to an Alateen meeting a week. And the rules basically were, I mean, this is kind of bad, but don't get caught. You know, with whatever I was doing, because I heard 1,000 times, because I'm not going to bail you out of jail. And this was the 80s. I'm a few years older than you, but and I mean, we used to go to punk shows down the street from where we are right now, including the Red Hot Chili Peppers back in the day.
Oh, really?
But I mean, they were more funk back then.
We are both tall, lanky gentlemen that were in the punk scene, living with dad, having to go, hey, this is
Did you go
pretty
to
fucking nuts.
Private school? When you?
No, I went to public school.
Okay, so I went to public school up to 9th grade, and then I went up going to Loyola with actually a bunch of Los Feliz kids. as
Oh,
a matter
no
of fact.
kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you
Yeah.
live here still?
Manhattan Beach.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'm splitting time between here and New York now.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
are the correspondent for ABC News. when it
ABC,
comes- Yes.
for true crime, all things murder and mayhem.
Oh boy.
Okay, so let's find out. So this is incredible that you had that experience.
Yeah, I
because
mean,
the group of friends is so unique. The kids I met in there were a blast because they were already fucked up and got
great
sober.
bunch, totally, and a bunch of kids that you could really relate to. I had friends who came from really nice families. And my family was so fucked up that like when I got in there with those kids, they were sort of my people.
They
you
knew
know?
what was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
And
mom ever get sober?
she got sober at 75.
Whoa.
No
Yeah,
way.
yeah. Like right when I thought I was completely done, and she had like, she was a nurse, so she retired, and like a lot of retired people, she went off the rails completely.
Yeah, of course.
And a friend of hers called in a welfare check, and they went in, and she was a 4.2 blood alcohol level. And so that's what finally kicked it. I mean, like,
I can't believe she wasn't in a coma.
I know.
oh, and they found her passed
At
out
75 of
at 75, 4.2.
She would have
with-
lived to be 160 if she had been.
Yeah, I know. And she would have. It's like Scotch Irish genes, you know. And I mean, she had to be a 5.0 at least when she actually at her peak
Oh my
for that
God.
event.
Was she in your life?
Oh yeah.
She was,
Yeah,
okay.
my mom. I love my mom forever. You know, until she died a couple of years ago.
Well, you have to because dad leaves and now he's the bad guy. And
But
she's,
he lived with his dad.
I
ultimately.
switched. I lived with her, and then I moved in with him in 9th grade because she was
Too much.
She was a mess. Yeah, and my brother and sister too.
How do you get college bound from this childhood?
Well, I wanted to get the hell out.
Where'd you go to college?
UCSB. And that was another thing. So I'm 15 years old. I grew up surfing here, right? So
Right.
I took a surf trip with a bunch of buddies. Like when your first friend gets his driver's license, and then you're packing like 8 kids into the car because now you have freedom.
Yeah.
We went up there and there's a place called Campus Point at UCSB. You lived in Santa Barbara for a spell.
For 1
right?
year, yeah.
Okay.
And I was lured there by visiting Ivy right out of high school.
so
and I was like, get real.
Yeah.
You'd be on the ocean and party.
Disneyland has nothing like the happiest place on earth, right?
Yeah. It's impossible.
And I went up there. I'd never been. I'm 15 years old, and we roll on it. It's like one of those classic Southern California days. And like the one day of the year that Campus Point is firing. So it's the best wave I've probably ever seen at that point. And there's beautiful girls everywhere on bikes. And it's like, where the hell is this? And that was it. All I wanted to do. It's like I found the next phase.
Okay, so you got BA at UCSB, and then where'd you go to law school?
San Diego. Went down there, lived on the beach for another 3 years.
Okay,
and,
you were just chasing beach lifestyle.
I was. I got the sun damage to prove it, unfortunately, now.
And when you were going after a law degree, was it your intention to be a prosecutor or a defense attorney?
I kind of stumbled into it. I started a sexual assault education program as an undergrad because we could make fraternity pledges and sorority pledges go. So like I got the orientation from your classic, women's center orientation, and where they were yelling at all us for being men, and and then I had a friend that got sexually assaulted, and it was actually somebody I was dating when I was on semester at sea, and I came back, and it was a horrific experience. Yeah. And so I thought, I could maybe take a different approach, and it caught on. So that caught the eye of the FBI. And this woman, Kathy Harper, her whole thing was sexual assault. That was her background with the DA's office. So I got recruited by the FBI and by her. And it was kind of like...
In law school or?
In law school.
In law school.
Yeah.
Oh my
So it was
God.
it was kind of cool. And this fancy PI firm that was offered, me a track to make a bunch of money.
Oh, really?
I decided I'd give the DA's office a whirl.
Boy, really quick, you asked 23-year-old me, I'm probably going to FBI. I want to kick some doors down. And
It sounded awesome.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it looked really, really cool. But the rule back then was that they wouldn't assign you to an area where you went to college, where you grew up, or we went to undergrad. And I was like, I'm a talentless surfer, trust me. But way too lanky, but I loved it, and I just wanted to keep doing it. So that at age 23, it was like, this means I can't surf anymore, which is the logic
Totally.
of a friggin' 23 going on 15-year-old. So I thought, DA's office. My plan was to do it for 3 years, and then what happens is at the end of my first day as a junior law clerk in 1992, I was hooked.
Really?
At the end of my very first day, I was like, I knew it's what I wanted to do. The longer you stay, the more interesting it gets, the more skill you get as a trial lawyer. And that office back then, it was a trial philosophy. So they really wanted you to get as skilled as you could. And it's like a craft, like picking a jury. And I sucked so bad when I first started, but it starts getting more and more fun and stressful. And then you start doing felonies, and then it gets more interesting. I kind of resisted mentors for a long time. And then I don't know what it was, but I had a couple of these guys take me under their wing, a couple of the old school guys. And then I really kind of felt like I had an actual teacher. So I'd go in and try things in a courtroom. Yeah. And then you'd start dealing with real victims. I went to sexual assault, and I spent 4 years there. And when you sit down with a crying mom whose kid has been sexually abused, sexual abuse is so ubiquitous. And so many of us have had that happen to us over the years. And I've had juries where the judge, they'll ask a question, have you or anybody close to you been a victim or experienced something similar? I've had
it's a rhetorical question at this point.
It is a rhetorical. I've had every hand go up in the box, 12 out of 12 jurors. So then you start dealing with that. And with those guys, with the real pedophiles, the predatory ones especially, you do some good when you get one of those guys on a tough case. When you win those, you are impacting the lives of all
dozens
the
of
victims,
people,
right?
Probably, yeah.
And then you get to Homicide, which is varsity, and that's where it gets fascinating. That's what I wrote my book about, was that kind of the journey, showing up and knowing nothing about murders, and then starting at ground zero. And I tried to take the reader through my experience on that.
Well, let's set the stage. First and foremost, you're here because we just interviewed Anna Kendrick, and we just saw her movie, which is great. And it is a factual case. Of course, it's been artistically interpreted, but it's a real life case from the 70s. And as it turns out, you were on that case in an iteration of it. But you were with the DA's office in Orange County, which I think this shocked me even knowing about Orange County, but it's the third largest DA's office in the country. And under your purview is 3 million people.
Right.
I don't think people would really know that.
Yeah.
That kind of shocked
that
me
is
a little
good.
bit.
Yeah, New York, and then you got LA, and then
Orange County.
Orange County, and
Wow.
it vies for third, depending on the population of, I think, Detroit. I think Atlanta had a really big one for a while. It's up to third largest DA's office in the United States.
And so you had a 27-year career there, 17 of which was with Homicide. And in that 17 years, you prosecuted and or worked on a lot of the cases we know about from pop culture.
Yeah.
Right out of the gates, Dirty John, I read. I was like, what are the fucking odds that we'll meet the person? Yeah, so that's pretty wild. But I think we start at the beginning because it's a wild ride. First and foremost, when you were working the sexual victims unit, you were warned by an early mentor. You said the move is to find a buddy. Hopefully you have one to have someone show you the ropes. And they said to you, your love life is going to be in shambles after this. And you're like, not a chance.
Because of SVU?
The subject matter. I mean, it's for a variety of reasons.
But Matt was like, I would have been like, get real.
fuck that.
I'm mid-20s. What are you talking about?
Superman.
Nothing
Yeah,
can
yeah,
stop
yeah.
me.
And it was a buddy of mine. He's a couple years older than me in the office, still one of my best friends. And he's like, dude, forget it. And basically it's like the women tend to do a lot better in that unit for whatever reason than the men do. And
Really?
I think that there's a thing called pornography, not that I've ever watched it before. However, it's like watching.
You know it
Explain it.
exists.
I know it exists. I read about it. Anyway, it's like 10 hours a day of anti-porn where you're watching you're immersed, up to your eyeballs in the worst stuff you can imagine. And it doesn't take you long before you realize it's 99.99% men, male sexuality. And it really does kind of screw with your head a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that line between like normal sexual drive and healthy relationships.
Well, it's a continuum, and you're like, I'm here.
Right.
Where does it get pathological?
Right. And it does. It screws with your head like nothing else. And then it's hard not to bring home.
I'd way rather see murders for sure.
Honestly, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Yep, it's a lot easier. And I mean, a lot of murders, there's a sex element to them, like Rodney
I want to get
Alcala.
into that, yeah.
Yeah. And Golden State Killer was one of mine as well.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And that guy was, a lot of the serial killers really do. They start out with, it's a sex crime fundamentally. And, I talk about this a little bit in the book. My next book, hopefully if I get another deal, it's going to be about serial killers specifically because I feel like there's so much meat on that bone.
Yeah. And we're going to build to that because I have
Yeah.
a lot of sexual questions around that. It does seem, I mean, truly, it seems like, at least from the stuff I consume, there seems to be a really ubiquitous sexual insecurity driving a lot of this.
That's interesting. That's
Sexual insecurity.
That's an interesting observation. I've never heard anybody say that before.
Really?
I think you're exactly right. An insecurity element. That is, I got to think about that.
Like let's just say, my penis is so small, I can't be with anyone in the normal way.
Yeah.
But I can force myself on this, and then I can end their experience.
Well, I can give you kind of a news flash here that nobody knows, and I don't mind saying it, and I hope he's listening. Joseph D'Angelo, Golden State Killer.
Yeah.
Tiny dick. Like micro penis
Yeah.
small.
Really?
I don't think that's ever come out in any of the books, but yeah,
I intuitively know that's part of some of these things.
there's something to that.
It's going to work in tandem with my other hunch I have about all of them is they're kind of all smart and they're underachievers. And they
lot of
think
them
they're
are
supposed
really
to be
smart.
someone important because they
Yeah.
were intelligent enough to be so.
Yep.
And then they underperformed. Yet they have this entitlement. I should have been this, and I'm fucking angry.
Dude, you have no idea how right you are. That it's entitlement, and there's a myth out there with a lot of serial killers that they're a product of abuse. And I've had an issue with it. I showed up looking for Buffalo Bill, thinking all serial killers. Like I saw Silence of the Lambs. I know what it is.
Yeah.
And I got there, and what they were, a lot of serial rapists tend to be super arrogant, entitled, just like you were saying. Like they're very, very smart. A lot of them are spoiled as kids.
Yeah.
And they
They were told they were great.
They were told they were great, and then they get out there in the real world, and women aren't so interested in them. And there's a component of that for sure, and they feel entitled to do it.
Yes.
And
I was owed this.
Yeah, I was owed
this.
this.
Is my
and-
birthright.
and I'm going to take it.
Yep.
And they get off on it.
Yeah.
And that there are definitely threads there. And there's kind of this myth out there. Like one of the most common questions you get when you're actually prosecuting those cases is, what made them do it? And the answer is they fucking want to do it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, can I swear on this? Is that okay?
Yeah.
They want to do it. It turns them on. And they get off on it, and they feel like they're entitled to
God's
do it.
powerful.
That's right.
Yeah.
They get off on the power.
And they're proving to everyone, I am fucking
Right. The more sadistic fear and pain they can inflict on their victims, the better. And like Alcala, Anna's movie, and it's her movie's based on a chapter in the book, Rodney Alcala. And I
How do you say his last name?
Alcala. And he grew up in
Rodney.
East LA, actually, Cantwell High School, which is another college prep school.
Oh,
Guy was a
really?
varsity letterman.
Oh my God.
Genius level IQ, Mensa certified, like the whole deal. Brother went to West Point, hero
my
in Vietnam.
God.
Totally successful, mother who loved him, never abused or bullied by anybody. And the guy probably murdered 100 people. And one of the things, I mean, Anna Kendrick, I got to tell you, so I get a call in the middle of COVID from her people, and it's, hey, Anna Kendrick wants to talk to you about a movie. Of course, I'll talk to her. Right away, she was super sensitive about the victims and wanted to make sure that if they were making a movie, she was sensitive to that.
Yeah.
And, you know, the way Orange County works is a little different than most DA's offices. It's called a vertical system. So I was assigned Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach, Newport, and Irvine. And then I became one of the 2 cold case deputies, which is how I got Alcala. And we start the night of the murder. So we'd go to the crime scenes ourselves. We'd help with warrants, work with the detectives from the minute the murder happens all the way up. And then the detective that you're with that night is with you at counsel table when the jury comes back and there for sentencing. So it's a real team thing. So as a result of that, first thing I would do is meet with the victims' families after I filed charges in whatever kind of murder it was. And you bond with those people and you get really protective of them. So when she said she wanted to make a movie and wanted to make sure she did it right from the victim's perspective.
Yeah, she's telling their story, not his.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is admirable.
Which was...
But it left me with a ton of questions about him, which you're going to answer.
but yeah, I can answer them. I know everything about that.
No, I think it's a very cool and
Mother effer.
respectful approach to it.
The new serial killer to me is the mass shooter. And it's because it's, to me, very similar. The type, the insecure boy, almost always, who, you know, has trouble with women or girls and feels entitled and is on this like power trip. I feel like serial killers have moved into that realm, and it's the same type of person.
So the FBI would say that's a spree killing and a little bit different, the psychology. And I like your theory on that. For the true blue serial killers, like the real, like the Bundys, the Jack the Rippers, there's a sexual component that
always,
you know, the school shooter tends to really be that outcast, kind of picked on, bullied kid.
I was going to say the way I've seen those folks is a little different, and I witnessed it so much growing up in the way I did in the time I did, which is like the system ruined a lot of kids. It absolutely fucking ruined and left for dead a lot of kids that didn't fit in.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kids that are so hurt by that. I'm not justifying it, but I think it's a different motivation. It's not, I'm entitled. It's that you guys are making me suffer so much. I'm going to make you suffer back. Revenge. It's like a revenge as opposed to.
Yeah. It's a different animal. And I go through the kind of the taxonomy of murders. Like a domestic violence murder is very different than a child abuse murder, which is very different than like a tweaker robbed the 7-Eleven murder, you know, like the conspiracies to kill for money. So they're all a little bit different. You always wind up with a dead body at the end, but you start seeing some of the same things over and over if you do them long enough. Like serial killers love to collect trophies. You know, it's almost like they go to school for it.
Well, again, they're proud of themselves. They've proved that they're smarter than everyone else.
Yeah, and a disturbing thing like Alcala, you know, for anybody that's interested, I got into probably the Alcala chapter more than anything else in the book because the deeper you look in serial killers and the psychological motivations, to me anyway, the more fascinating it gets, you know.
Definitely.
And when you get into the history of them, I always thought it was a product of like modern American life, you know, like the sort of the disaffected youth and all that. I thought that. And then you get into, I read Mindhunter by Douglas, who was the FBI agent who wrote Silence of the Lambs originally. And then from that, there's a great FBI paper, and they talk about the first real attempt to get a handle on him. And it was this guy, Dr. von Kraft-Ebing, and he wrote a book in the 1880s. He was a contemporary of Freud, and he was a German psychiatrist, never been to America. It's a whole section full of serial killers that we've never heard of, going back hundreds of years, European. So it's not an American thing.
It's timeless.
It's timeless. It's something in the human like community, psyche, whatever it is, that there are those guys.
And the only primate that we have that kills for pleasure other than us is chimps.
Yeah.
And what do chimps have in common with us? They're incredibly intelligent and they have a very stratified hierarchy. So if they're low status and they feel low status, the outcome of that is often homicidal or chimpicidal.
What is it, like 98.9% of our DNA is shared with
chimps? Did you see
chimps?
Chimp Crazy?
I haven't seen Crazy yet?
Oh, it's
No.
so
You must on HBO. Or Max
So
now.
good.
Everybody's face gets ripped off
Yes.
again, right? Yeah.
Again, look how chimps kill people. Tigers, they get you around the neck, they kill you. They want to eat you.
Yeah.
A chimp unleashes fury and
They rip off your balls.
What do they call it? It's
right?
a crime of passion. They want to make you suffer.
They don't even really necessarily want you dead.
They want to maim
They just
you
want
and
to
mangle
hurt
you.
you. Yeah.
So disturbing.
It is.
Right? It's in us. It's in us all.
It gives you that sense it's just so close at all times. Circling all the way back, what was it about the being in the sexual? Do you think you could articulate specifically? One is like you're seeing horrific graphic things.
Yeah.
That's disturbing, and that will not make you that'll make you anti-horny.
Anti-horny. Yeah.
And then I also think, but I think deeper and more interesting is coming to terms with where you're at in this weird thing. You possess this same weird drive, and we all have levels of perversion. Like, is it almost like seeing a glimpse of your own sexuality gets scary to you?
Yeah, that is a real effect of that. Your job is taking down the guys that are hurting people with their sexuality. And right away, it's like you become so paranoid of your own sexuality as a man.
You have to govern this drive.
Right.
And you maybe get a sense of like, wow, ungoverned, I'm afraid of who I would be or who anyone would be.
You know, yes, that's a huge part of it. And also for me, as a guy, we all have to learn. You have to control those urges.
That's
you
right.
know, and we learn that. And that's something that I think men in a sort of traditionally masculine way, we learn that very early on, that like, and among other men, a lot of people don't talk about this, like the dude who can't control his urges becomes an outcast if he doesn't get his ass kicked very quickly by the other men in whatever little crew he's in, right?
Right.
If he's surrounded by any sort of decent group of guys. So you learn to control it. And then in that unit, what happens is you overcompensate. And I think that I became, I mean, this is probably way more information than anybody.
But what's great about your book is it's your personal story interwoven with your professional one. So,
well, I became passive sexually, probably to the point of being a lousy partner for, you know, my girlfriend at the time was, I mean, she was gorgeous. And, you know, she was a dime from any measure. Like, got her master's in architecture and graduated from UCLA and like, absolutely.
Sign me up.
She was a catch in every way. And then here I am, and it's like,
You're
I'm
retired
like,
from sex.
Yeah, I'm basically like,
It's scary.
yeah, I retired at age 28 from, and probably didn't do much for our relationship, actually. Like, it's like,
So you're in that unit for a while, and then you get called up to the big leagues, which is Homicide, and everyone's aiming towards that. And you have this kind of well-worn stereotype or trope, which is you're nervous the first time you go to a crime scene because you know of these people who've come before you who show up and throw up. And we see it in movies, we see it.
right.
Just rewatched Seven.
It's a great movie.
Such a good movie.
Masterful.
So good.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, Kevin Spacey, who I think is getting uncanceled now. I think.
Is he?
I think so.
Is he?
I think he just did a Broadway thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I don't pretend to know how any of that stuff works. But amazing actor, if nothing else.
Yeah,
right?
well, that is true. I won't take that from him.
But Brad Pitt, and that was amazing. Morgan Freeman was amazing.
They're
But yeah, no, I don't know what it's like. It'd probably be the equivalent of like you're an actor and you have just wound up on doing your first scene with somebody like a Morgan Freeman. I had the biggest imposter syndrome ever.
You were inordinately young for the position as well, right?
I was,
There's some objective truths going on.
I was on a rocket, and I looked like I was 12. And I go to the crime scene, and come on, everything you see on TV, the new guy always pukes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm literally walking into that going, don't puke, Murphy, don't puke. Because if anybody's capable of throwing up on a dead body or doing something that dumb, it's me, right? I'm 33.
You had been surfing that morning.
I was surfing that morning trying to get over a broken heart from the UCLA grad because
she moved on.
Yeah, she moved on to a guy who is my buddy.
She wasn't retired sexually quite yet.
She was not. She was not. And my buddy Greg, as he put it, the guy she wound up marrying, he's just like you, dude, just a little better in every way.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Yeah, I walked into that crime scene. We had a dead guy on his back in a kitchen. And the majority of the crime scenes are inside, you know, and a lot of them are domestics, and which is what this wound up being. But I walk in and it's like, don't puke, don't puke, don't puke. And I look down and he had a folding knife in his left hand and a wallet chain into his right back pocket. And I immediately, like, immediately jumped out at me. Like, why would a right-handed guy have a knife in his left hand or a left-handed guy have his wallet in his right back pocket? And here's another thing that isn't in the book. First thing, the detective Byington, who wound up being one of my best friends, and he wound up being the lead in so many of the stories I talk about in so many of the cases, but he lifts up the shoulder because what happened was she, the killer, who was his mistress, I guess we could call her.
He was married, having an affair with her. She had just gotten broken up with by her boyfriend, who she still lived with.
Right. And so she starts seeing our guy. And I don't know if he was still living with his wife or if they were separated. But, and this is super weird, and this is also not in the book. His brother had a dream. His brother was a really deeply religious guy to the point of being kind of out there a little bit. Has a dream where his brother is killed. Again, my whole thing with the families, and he told me that he has a dream that he sees his brother's death. And so he talked to him and said, God came to me in a dream and showed me your death, and he's going to strike you down if you don't end this sinful relationship and go back to your wife and kids. And that's true story. And if that isn't the weirdest friggin' thing, and I'm not religious, but so we always kind of thought he had this talk with his brother, and he went over to end it, and she couldn't handle 2 breakups. So she shot him. He was hauling ass for the stairs, and there was one grazed wound to his arm, and we see all these bullet holes on the wall upstairs, broken glass. As he's going down the stairs, she got him once in the back. Then he goes down, and he's on his back, and she shot him twice in the heart, once in the temple, once in the mouth. Oh. So the detective, now I'm 30, this is my first murder scene. I'm just thinking, don't throw up, don't throw up. He lifts up his shoulder to show me the 2 bullet holes, in the wood underneath, which is significant because it indicates degree between a first and second. Also, it was a 6-shot revolver, and there were 8 holes, so she had to reload, which legally is all very significant. He lifts up the shoulder, and I'm in the don't puke mode, and the guy groans. Because, a lot of people...
The air came out of his mouth?
The air came out of his mouth, and it's like, ugh. And it's like, it's like haunted house.
You're just trying to act
house.
like you've been in this situation
I've seen this a million times. It's like, are we sure this guy's dead?
Dead men don't talk. Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do. So that was my first one. And then what happened? She bails out. This is my first week in the unit.
I want to add, she is financial manager.
A financial planner, 41 years old. Never been in trouble a day in her life. Ties to the community, grew up in Newport Beach area. So she's got a right to bail. And back then it was $250,000. And she can make it, and I've got no arguments to keep her in, and this is statutory bail. And she gets out and tracks down the ex-boyfriend who had just broken up with her, and they were still living together. He's in a hotel, and he falls asleep. Unbeknownst to him, she brought in a tire iron from the car, bludgeons him to death in his sleep.
Next night.
What?
Yeah. Right after bailing out, and then goes to the place called the Firing Line in Huntington Beach, rents a gun, and
Kills herself.
Suicides. Yeah,
in a firing range.
This is my first week, and I think I've got the shortest career in the homicide unit because I must have screwed something up. And my boss, who was wonderful, he's like, "How's this your fault?" He's like, "She had a right to bail."
Right.
I hate to tell you this, I'm so relieved that was the first story. Because I'm so sick of us men killing everyone and hurting everyone. Anytime a woman's a piece of shit, I'm like, well, thank God there's a couple of them.
Yeah, somebody on their team is doing something wrong. Yeah.
It is weird because normally women kill themselves. Normally she would have killed herself first before killing everyone else.
Yeah, it's the tire iron where I go, oh, bitches can get down too. Boy,
Oh, yeah,
we can all be nasty. If you can go in and bludgeon someone to death with a tire iron, I mean, that is a dude move.
And not only she didn't hit him once or twice until he was shaking. She bashed his face into the point that we needed fingerprints to identify him.
Oh,
I mean, we had a pretty good idea who it was because he ran out of the room, but.
She went Tonka.
Full Tonka. That's one of the chimps from the doc.
Yeah.
You'll learn.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Full Tonka.
What is the experience working with detectives? Because you maybe delineate that you guys have different roles. What the detective has to do versus you have to build a case. These are kind of separate things. So what are the pros and cons of those relationships?
First of all, beginning with the FBI, I got to work in some of those task forces over the years. And the FBI agents, in my experience, are some of the best people I've ever met.
Yeah, they're so cool.
They're so cool. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of them are lawyers. They went to law school. I mean, they tried to get me out of law school.
Right.
The FBI as an administration, like you hear this word, when they want to tell you no, and there's no logical reason for it, you hear the word protocol. Protocol. Oh, it's just the protocol. And you deal with some of the most ridiculous shit dealing with the FBI.
Yeah.
And the agents are wonderful. And so they made up for some of the negative experiences you deal with admin.
With the bureaucracy.
So the philosophy of the vertical unit, it was a guy named Francisco Briceño who just passed away. He was a Superior Court judge, but he used to be head of the Homicide unit, Vietnam War hero, came back with a guy named Ed Freeman, who back in the early 80s was a World War II war hero. So you get these two guys, and they built the Homicide unit, and they came up with this vertical concept. And what they wanted was for their young women and men in the Homicide unit to be able to bond with their detectives to eliminate a lot of those problems. So especially, Southern California is a patchwork of small cities, right? So my cities of Newport, Costa Mesa, Laguna, and Irvine are all small police departments. And when you go in, it's like that day, those guys, I think in a way, Byington was trying to freak me out a little bit. Almost like it was a little bit of a hazing the new guy and can this guy hang sort of thing.
Rite of passage.
It's a rite of passage. Yeah. And right when I walked in the door, and I left this out of the book, they were literally, it was like a scene straight out of TV. They'd forensically processed the living room part of this townhome, and they were eating a pizza in the door.
The guy said to Matt, he goes, well, she killed the shit out of him.
Yeah, she killed the shit out of him. Basically stapled him to the floor. And this guy is, a lot of detectives are funny as shit.
Oh, yeah.
You got to.
You have no choice.
The gallows humor. Another interesting thing about the best detectives and the best prosecutors too, I think, it's the guys that are like one bad decision away from being the same people they're investigating.
1,000%.
Those are the ones.
Well, because you can understand, I have this too. I'm a scumbag. I'm a recovering addict. I can drop into a mindset pretty easily of feeling like I'm owed something. I'm justified for this,
As far as detectives go, there are detectives who literally are Boy Scouts that live this very Joe Friday life, just the facts, ma'am. And you encounter those, and they're great at, the documents, the police reports. There's no spelling errors in them, and they're great, and they have their advantages. When it comes to the really bad, the serial killers you got to catch, the cases that are impossible that nobody else wants to take a run on, give me the mutant that almost got fired a couple times, and that's the person.
You got to get in their head.
Well, that's the person that's going to win it for you, and that's the one that you can also, when they're sitting next to you during jury selection, that's the person you can lean over to. I keep saying guys. A lot of these are women. Some of the best investigators I worked with were women.
Yeah. But I'm sure increasingly so over the course of your career.
Increasingly
92 or 93.
But even then, they're the women that have been divorced a couple times. It's the same thing.
They're paying the same price everyone else pays for that job.
100%. And they're the ones that, the more twisted they are, that's the one you can lean over to and go, juror number 10, what do you think? And you need that kind of guidance when you're, especially when you've been doing it for a while. Like I needed as much help as I could get. But it's interesting. We would do these juror questionnaires on the really heavy stuff, like the serial killers and the death penalty cases.
This sounds crazy, but I do think we should just mention for people who are 25 years out of jurisprudence, when the case begins, you're starting with an ample amount of juries, and you're going to get to kick some off as the prosecutor, and the defense is going to get to kick some off. So you're trying to figure out who's going to be helpful, right?
Right. So you get 20 each. You get 20 challenges on a life case.
Okay.
So for no reason, they're called peremptory. So I can boot a jury for any reason other than race, basically. Yeah. So, but if they come in and they're wearing a shirt you don't like, or you're allowed to kick them if you get a bad feeling in your gut.
Right.
And so when you come up through the ranks, like I did 37 misdemeanor jury trials before I touched my first felony, and you don't get to do questionnaires into any of those. And questionnaires you get to ask them all kinds of things. And I learned over the years that you got to trust the gut, not the paper version.
Right.
Because they can look really good on paper, and like it's kind of like dating in a way.
Well, also people answer questions in a way they think they're supposed to answer versus there's a quadrillion bits of information coming at you that are nonverbal.
That's right.
You have a lot of experience.
Which is the most important thing from chimpanzees on up.
But back to, so the police, they're very helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
So those detectives, sorry, I took us on a tangent. The thing about a vertical unit is you get a relationship with them, and you win a couple tough ones, and pretty soon those cops are listening to everything you have to say because they want to win. They want. I would meet with the families, but these cops would do the death notifications. And imagine that. Like, there is nothing, I think the most extreme emotion I've ever experienced is I mean, of course for the dads too, but for the moms who have had a child that's been murdered. Like and imagine like you're a cop who has to break the news to them.
No thanks.
And that cop, when they go through that, you talk about tolls on relationships and alcoholism and all that.
Yeah.
when they got the right guy and they know they got the right guy, they want to win that case. And when you bring it home for them, and then, you win a tough one.
Well, it's this beautifully symbiotic relationship,
It really
which is you
yeah.
got to gather everything perfectly.
Yep.
And then I'm going to slam dunk this.
And when you're in the foxhole like that with somebody and you go through a really hard trial and that detective sitting next to you, you come to love them and
Yeah,
they
I
love you
bet.
back and they wind up being some of your closest friends.
I would imagine that y'all's integrity gets tried probably more than almost any other job. I'd imagine it's quite tempting. I bet it's presented all the time that you could massage something and you would know I'm kind of violating this person's right, but I know they're guilty and it's worth it. I bet that comes up a lot, does it?
It definitely happens. And as a defense lawyer, I've seen more of that. I defend a lot of police officers, and I'm dealing with a case right now where they pulled some stuff that I've been shocked as a former prosecutor. I can't believe that anybody
That the
would do it.
prosecution's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, when you do it long enough and they let you actually be a pro as a prosecutor, you learn pretty early in your career that the only thing worse than a family losing a loved one is losing a loved one, getting a conviction, and then having to do it all over again because somebody doesn't turn something over.
Because here's a hypothetical I could imagine happening. I could imagine finding a bit of evidence. And now if I take that on, I'm legally obligated to turn that over to the defense, right? And I might go, I'm just going to skip that altogether. I didn't see that. I don't have to incorporate that because I don't really want to turn that over.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
those little question marks probably
So when I
arise.
came through, there's a guy named Chris Evans, who's now a Superior Court judge, real world guy. He was a fireman who went to law school at night. And so he was a citizen of the actual world. He taught us, and the guy was uniquely gifted as an actual trial lawyer. And I used to go watch him when I was a law clerk. And what he told us was, make sure the defense has everything, and then beat them with it. And that was what we got taught. And so, for anybody that is that's holding evidence back, number one, it's totally illegal. In the state of California, it's actually a felony. But it also is the people that do the dirty tricks as defense lawyers or prosecutors. They're trying to compensate for a lack of game.
Yeah.
And if you've really learned the craft and you've studied it, as a prosecutor, if you can't convince a jury, you shouldn't win the case. And, because that's, even if you're convinced the guy did it, you can't cheat to win.
You have to have a level of respect for the system that transcends all your...
You really do. And the thing is that, you also, your reputation's all you have in that business. And, to hold something back, and I don't know, the best prosecutors really are kind of like, my buddy Jim Mendelson was an actual fighter pilot before he went to law school, and they're gunslingers. And they
want to fight.
They want to fight, and
they don't want to cheat and win.
No, there's a spectrum of talent in anything.
Sure.
But like the guys I was in the unit with, and guys including women, they were some of the most twisted, diabolically genius, people, and they were superheroes in my eyes, and they would turn everything over. The ones I worked with, because they would never admit they sweated any defense lawyer they were coming up against. They wanted to beat them, and the tougher the case, the better. As weird as that sounds.
Now, if they were prone to be problematic, where was it generally going to surface? Your interaction with law.
Muni court and doing misdemeanors. The ones who suck are never going to get to homicide in the first place.
Yeah.
And so you wind up with kind of the exact opposite. You wind up with a bunch of people who are kind of brazen, sharp-elbowed, who relish the challenge. And that's one of the things that as a prosecutor, though, one of the tough parts is there are three things alleged on every appeal. The appellate defense counsel will always accuse the trial lawyer, defense attorney, of being incompetent.
Right.
So they get accused of incompetence. The judge gets accused of some sort of malfeasance and forgetting to instruct on something, some sort of incompetence.
Yeah.
And the prosecutor always gets accused of misconduct. And it is kind of right now, there's a lot of, the police have had a hard time, and some of that goes over into prosecutors, and there's people that are open to that idea.
And also, what gets made, what do I watch? I'm very heartbroken and interested when I see on Frontline the confessions, and they got 7 confessions from 7 guys who are all below a 3rd grade reading level that were scared. That sting of injustice on that level and innocence is so strong that obviously you could probably misevaluate how prevalent. Who knows? I don't really know.
I sit on a board with Purdue University. It's a post-exoneration board where our whole task is trying to find people in Indiana that have been falsely convicted.
Right.
And I work with a guy named Timmy Donnell on that, who's an exoneree. I freaking love this guy. And like, of all the people on the board, and there's a bunch of like rich, fancy, famous people.
Yeah.
Timmy's the guy. And so he did 21 years for a murder that he actually did not commit. And that's coming from a career prosecutor, actually innocent. And there's a bunch of mistakes that were made. And they kept offering him deals and he refused to take it because he really didn't do it. And so
what a proposition to present to somebody.
Oh, yeah, right? Yes. Talk about a devil's bargain. And he's like, no, I'll stay in prison before I'll admit something I didn't do.
Wow.
And talk about a man of integrity.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it happens. And if you got a heart, which you clearly do, it's the worst injustice imaginable.
That's why our system's set up the way it is. To let many guilty people go is preferred to a single innocent person.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And that's the way it should work. It gets problematic when we get into the serial killers that are going to victimize other people.
Yeah.
I think it gets into problem there. And I think where jurisprudence is most problematic is in sexual assault. It's still
100%.
almost impossible to prosecute.
100%.
In my opinion, let me hit you with this.
Yeah.
I was reading Missoula, the John Krakauer book on the kind of rape epidemic at Missoula. The problem prosecuting these kids, and then the problems with the juries, even if they get the stuff they need. It needs degrees like murder, I think. I think that's one of the problems is you have these jurors looking at these young people and there's no degree, so it's all in or all out. And they have a hard time finishing a young person.
Yeah.
Not that they shouldn't be finished. That's not what I'm saying. But I think if there were degrees within it, it could move the needle
That's
a bit.
a really interesting idea because you're absolutely right. Like a 288, that's sexual abuse of a minor. There's one charge. And same thing with, there's different subsections of a rape, but that word is a heavy thing. And a lot of jurors, you're right. I prosecuted, my niche was date rapes. And you don't want to tag a kid as a rapist for life for a misunderstanding or a drunken miscommunication.
You have two people in a blackout. We're reconstructing two people's blackouts.
And it's a really tough thing. We should be careful about that.
It's messy as fuck is what it is.
It's really messy. Words are important, right? You're right. Maybe if there were degrees.
But who's going to come up with the degrees? Like that would be, that's very tricky too. Like to me, there's some things that are worse. I'm going to get in trouble for just saying that, worse than others.
Well, yeah.
But there are.
Look, I was molested.
I
There's worse versions of the way I was molested. I can tell you as someone who's molested, there are worse versions. If that was my parent, that's fucking worse. If it were reoccurring for years, yes, if there was violent, there's for me, there's degrees of what I experienced for sure. I can.
But you know what's interesting about that? A lot of people, you encounter that, not to spin off on a tangent, a lot of people think that that's like a zombie bite. It's so many people have been molested. I still don't think the public understands that.
I admit it. I say it out loud.
Sure.
I didn't know of an actor when I was a kid that said he had been molested. I thought I was the only person. Like now people are talking about it, but.
I will bet a majority of men in Hollywood were the victims of sexual abuse at one point or another. I will bet you. Because I'm ready to come to terms with the idea that a majority of men in general in America at one point or another were sexually abused as a kid.
Yeah, the conservative estimates are like 25% of us that grew up in the 80s were, you know.
Yeah. Well,
so,
right. And our parents, they were smoking and drinking and like, and we were wildings as in our generation, for sure.
Completely unprotected.
But one of the things about it is that there's a weird stigma that needs to be relaxed, especially when it comes to men. A lot of people think it's like a zombie bite. Like somebody, we know what happens when you get bit by a zombie, right? Or bitten by a vampire.
Like you will then become a predator.
You will then become, right?
Yeah, I grew up with that paradigm.
Right. And so a lot of people keep quiet because and that is not the case at all. In fact, it's the exact opposite. A lot of people that have been sexually abused know how fucking awful it is, so they would never do it. And I understand that there's some psychology behind it, and some people that are horrifically abused, it affects them. But the vast majority of time, and this is 4 years in sex and 17 in homicide, which half are sex cases anyway, the majority of the offenders were never victims themselves. And I'm here to tell you that is a pervasive myth. I think that's another part of the stigma, right? Especially for men.
Fear that you would. Yeah, going to repeat
people are going to be like, oh, I don't want to leave them around with my kids.
Yeah. Okay, I want to hear about a few. You do a dozen or so cases throughout your long career in the book. I guess since it was prompted by Anna's movie, let's talk about him for a minute. The notion that this motherfucker was on the dating game blows my mind.
Right.
So tell us about him a little bit.
So he grew up loving home. never abused or bullied by anybody. And this is like the best investigators. He went through 3 different capital trials, which means you have A through K factors is what it's known in a bifurcated jury system in California. So those are the factors the jury gets to consider in weighing whether there's any mitigation. So A factors like circumstance of the offense, how brutal it was. B factors, other crimes of violence. And you go down the list, and essentially a serial killer is motivated, like in a life or death sort of way, to come up with any sort of abuse possible as a mitigating factor to present to their jury. So he had 3 great defense teams. They were unable to uncover a single instance. So he grows up in a loving home, successful siblings, mother who loved him, aunt very much in the picture. Father died when he was young, but went to prep school, varsity letterman, on the yearbook committee, graduated from UCLA Film School, genius level IQ, okay, and handsome for the day. And charming.
For the days. I mean,
charming.
currently he would.
He needs a haircut.
Not exactly
in
everybody's look,
2024.
but yeah, he's a good-looking dude back then.
Is the part in the movie where he worked at the LA Times as a photographer?
He was a typesetter, yeah. And he was, and he worked for the LA Times, gainfully employed. Oh. And so this guy gets, actually not far from where we are, 1968, he kidnaps, rapes, and almost murders an 8-year-old girl named Tally Shapiro. So anybody that wants the background, Anna's movie was wonderful. And like the detectives were involved in it, I give it an A+. Okay,
Yeah,
and the final scene, the only way it could have been more true to real life is if she'd made it longer. Phenomenal job. But so anyway, so he kidnaps this 8-year-old, Good Samaritan sees it, follows him to this little Hollywood bungalow, and all of this is in the book. I think people would be interested in it, I hope, but this cop, his name is Camacho, LAPD officer, hero cop, shot in Vietnam, comes back from the war, shot in the Watts riots. It's his first day back at work.
Oh my God.
And he gets a welfare call, and nothing about it seemed any more right in 1968 than it would today. So he knocks on the door, and he hears, 1 second, kicks the door in. And Alcala's going out the back naked, and he finds this little girl, 8 years old. She's been raped. She's in a coma for 32 days.
Stop.
She's got a barbell across her throat, seconds away from death. So this cop saves her life.
Whoa.
Alcala gets away, okay, gets to the East Coast, enrolls in NYU Film School. He'd already graduated from UCLA.
So wait, after that event, he decided to get out of town.
He fled.
Okay.
And inside his apartment, or the little duplex he was living in, they find hundreds and hundreds of photographs of young women and boys in positions of vulnerability, out in the woods, in rooms with him. Some of them are sexual, some of them are pornographic, some of them are modeling. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these things.
What age is he
that
at
they
that
lost?
point?
So this is 1968, mid to late 20s, mid 20s, I think at this point, 68.
So he's prolific. He's already
this guy is the real deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so goes to New York. They catch him. There's a rainstorm. He's working at an all-girls sleepaway camp in Vermont. And there's a rainstorm, and 2 of the little campers go running into the post office to get out of the rain. FBI 10 most wanted list. They look up, and they're like, that's weird. That's Mr. Berger, because he's a counselor at the camp. So they catch him, right? They catch him. They extradite him back to California. Winds up kidnapping and near death of an 8-year-old, and he raped her. There's a photo in that. This is one of the scenes that sticks with me, even though I wasn't physically there because I was 12 when it happened. Little White Mary Jane's in more blood than should ever be able to come out of an 8-year-old at the scene. So she survives miraculously. They extradite him. The prosecutor decides to give him a straight child molest case. And he goes in, he gets a life sentence. They paroled that guy after 34 months. And that is a cautionary tale. So he gets out, and they violate his parole. 34 months, goes out. They catch him with a 13-year-old girl that he was certainly on his way to killing. But they had marijuana. They went at prosecuting her for possession of marijuana.
Oh my God.
13 years old.
Fucking God.
So he gets about a year and a half. They release him again. It's like Forrest Gump. Again, gets out, and then he kidnaps Monique Hoyt. She's 15-year-old runaway, kidnaps her, rapes her, sodomizes her. She wakes up. He probably thought she was dead. She comes to and says, we can't let anybody know what we did. He had a moment of emotion, broke down crying, and then transported her wherever they were going. And she jumped out and called the police. And then the court has an obligation legally to presume the rape and kidnap is true and assess danger to the community. And knowing all the background, the judge lowered his bail. He got out and he kidnapped and murdered a 12-year-old girl out of Huntington Beach named Robin Samso. So he gets convicted, goes up, case gets reversed once by the California Supreme Court, convicted again in 1986, goes back up. Now it's the Ninth Circuit that reverses it. So the case has been twice gutted. Then it winds up on my desk. So we don't know anything at this point. This is 2002, late 2002, 2003. I get it assigned to me because I'm one of the cold case deputies. And this poor family has had to go through this twice now. And every time a case gets reversed, they
re-interview everybody.
Well, so we got to figure out what kind of evidence we have. The police in 1979 got into his storage locker, and again, different batch found hundreds and hundreds of photos of more young women and girls. So he killed 100 people after he was released from California State Prison, and then so he killed a 21-year-old computer programmer in Burbank, very close to where we are right now, named Jill Parenteau. We didn't know that. So it winds up on my desk, and I talked to my old mentor, and I'm like, what do we do with these? Because the case got gutted twice. And there was a photo found, this is kind of cool, of a girl named Lori Wirtz. She was on roller skates in a place called Sunset Beach that the detectives, it's right next to Huntington Beach. And that was in a storage locker. And it turns out that was from the same day that Robin Samso went missing. So we can put him in the area. And then we're kicking it around like, how do we freaking prove this thing? Yeah. And there were signs in the background that were still in the cement and the shadows. And we found some guy in the Navy of all places that was able to give us an exact time that photo was taken based on the shadows. Wow. So I'm locked and loaded. I'm ready to go again. No sooner do we make the decision that we're going to retry this fucker, that we start getting DNA hits out of LA County for unsolved murders because California just entered the CODIS system. So we get 3 DNA hits in LA County plus a 4th. He was a suspect in one, Jill Parenteau, the computer programmer. So now we got 5. So we constructed a whole thing. And then like a lot of good serial killers, because he's a psychopath, they can't resist the control. So he wound up representing himself.
Oh, this is a big move, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
They over-index in representing themselves, don't
100%, 100%, which is awesome because they all suck at trial.
Yeah.
Like whatever disconnects them from that makes them want to do it in the first place.
Of their arrogance.
Oh my God, it's the greatest thing
ever. If I were you, I'd just go like, so this guy's representing himself. I think that tells you everything you need to know. We rest our case.
Oh, there's a great adage, and I threw this in the book that you learn in law school. Anybody who represents himself as a fool for a lawyer and a jackass for a client, and it's and I mean it was surreal, but I had to deal with him every day. I had to go in and talk to him.
Oh my God!
And because you gotta move things along, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to talk to counsel. And for me, being kind of twisted, it was fascinating.
Oh, I would have enjoyed.
Tell us,
right?
what was he like?
Gosh. Well, first of all, so there's this moment like they don't give us any training on how death row actually works in California. And I just thought it was like one big prison yard, like a prison within a prison. It's all in San Quentin. And I didn't know yet that they subclassify them. And they have a yard they call themselves, and they divide it up into yards called the weenie yard, which are the guys that aren't dangerous to staff or other inmates. Okay. And so we just sentenced this guy, big like white supremacist gang leader, super gnarly dude. He'd just gotten the death sentence out of Orange County. So he goes up. And I'm sitting there, we're waiting for the judge one day, and I mean, I literally had to talk to this guy several hours every day for 6 months, because he's representing himself. So you develop a rapport.
Can I ask you one hard question?
Sure.
Because we interviewed the defense attorney that was representing the victims for Epstein.
Okay.
And he had several lunches with Epstein while he was representing those people. And he said, he's so fucking charming. Like, I'm there experiencing what they experienced and
That's
leaving going, boy, that was fucked up. Did you have any of that?
100%. That's why the actor who played Rodney Alcala in Anna's movie was friggin' brilliant.
Oh, he's so good.
Brilliant. Because he goes from that, everybody thinks, how can anybody get in
He won the dating game thing.
He won the dating game.
Of the 3 bachelors.
By being charming and funny. And the actor nails it because it's like, who would get in a car with that guy? Who would ever get in a car with that guy? And the answer is almost everybody because they're so freaking charming. But that's the thing with Alcala. So I'm like, hey, Rod, just out of curiosity, what do you do when a guy like Billy Joe, I mean, they talk about a cartoon character, and this guy had freaking swastika tats everywhere, the whole deal. Yeah. Aren't you worried that a guy like that is going to get to you? He goes, Matt, like, buddy, you know me. He's like, I'm on the weenie yard. I'm not violent. I'm never going to see that guy. He was offended that I would think that he was a violent guy. This guy murdered 100 women and smashed their faces in with rocks.
And that other guy's a Philistine.
Right. Like,
he's like,
are you kidding me?
me?
Totally.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
like that. Like
That guy's a racist.
Troglodyte. What are you talking about? He's got
Yeah.
swastika tattoos. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Do you think, but he believes that in the
Yes.
moment, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally in the moment. And that's
Yeah.
the charm. Watch the Bundy tapes where he's getting interviewed. It is fascinating. Bundy has a moment where the reporter says, hey, what's it like to know you're going to get executed tomorrow? And Bundy's response, I'll never forget this. He's like, my odds of getting executed tomorrow are about the same as yours getting killed in a car accident on the way home. He goes, God forbid that should happen. Like, and yeah,
So much concern for him.
so much concern. God forbid. What a horrible analogy to use. Like that, I am concerned with you. And they did. They freaking juiced Bundy the next day to the betterment of all mankind.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
The really smart psychopaths, they understand intuitively where that good heart opening is.
Yeah.
And they take advantage of it.
Well, no one likes this, but sociopaths over-index in empathy. They're
100%.
very, very good at knowing exactly how you feel and what you
100%.
want to hear.
That's exactly right. And that hypersensitivity to it is connected to their love of inflicting pain. You know, and even for the sociopaths that haven't killed anybody, like the ones that are running businesses, like there's that little element of cruelty that so many of them have. They get off on it.
I want to go through a couple more because the book is just full of so many riveting cases that you covered. I didn't realize Orange County was such a hotbed of activity.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But Skylar
Skylar De Leon. Yeah, so he was a Power Ranger. He had a speaking role. He's a child actor.
No.
Yeah. You know, he was, of all of the guys I dealt with, all the fraudsters, my Ed Shin was one of mine that I talk about in the book. Skylar was the best liar of anybody I'd ever seen.
Really?
Yes.
Because his name rhymed with it, or
Skylar the liar. So,
Good job, Mom.
Couldn't help
I like
myself.
it. I like that.
She's got a new Missoni sweater on. She's feeling pretty good
made me
today.
feel
Yeah.
thirsty.
No, it works. This guy was in the Marine Corps for about a second and went AWOL. A lot of them also joined the military and go AWOL. Alcala did. My Nairi guy did. My last one. That's another common thing that you see on the psychopaths. So he winds up putting together this scheme to basically murder people to get their money. And there's this beautiful couple, retirees, Tom and Jackie Hawks, who Jackie was in a motorcycle accident. She was in her 20s, couldn't have kids of her own, marries Tom. He had 2 young kids at the time, so she got to be mom, and then one of them had a baby. So they'd retired onto the ocean and sailed around on a yacht. So now they got a grandchild, and Jackie wants to experience that. So they decided to sell the boat, and they go out for a sea trial, which is basically a test drive for a yacht, never seen or heard from again.
Oh my
And so Skylar is there with all the bill of sale paperwork, fingerprints that we sent to the FBI. It was Tom and Jackie's fingerprints. They actually signed all the stuff, and there was one problem: the S on her signature didn't match, but everything else did. That became important. So they show up with these documents indicating they'd bought the boat. There was a notary that notarized the documents. They'd filed it with Prescott, Arizona, like everything legally they could do, indicating they'd purchased the boat, they had done. And so we had to untangle that. I do an annual surf trip with a bunch of buddies to Indonesia, and you sit on a charter surf boat for 12 days or whatever. I was going to skip that year. And anyway, I catch my girlfriend making out with the groomsmen at a wedding. And so that's bad.
That's
so
bad.
so I decided at the last second, I'm gonna take this surf trip. And I went up on this boat, this guy, Gary Burns, who was a part of the boating world. And he's a totally legit guy, but he had seen sort of the underbelly of it and met some smugglers and actual pirates along the way. And so there's Tom and Jackie, like 3 months later, they're missing. It's a Newport case. I'm working with Byington again, that same detective who moved the body and made the guy groan. And we were at a dead end, and we suspected something bad had happened, but we did 2 forensic workups of the boat.
So the boat was found.
Boat was found.
They're not on it.
The Tom and Jackie are missing, and you got Skylar and Jennifer saying, hey, we bought the boat, and here's all the documents indicating we bought it. And by the way, when you find these people, they promise to teach us how to operate it properly. We would hate to have to sue them. I mean,
this
it's
is
like,
a pretty good.
oh no, and I'm
That's a
telling
cool
you,
angle.
So I watch his interview, and it is, and credit to the detectives, I believed everything he was saying.
Yeah.
You know, and he was on probation for a burglary, at the time, and he goes, look, this is cartel money. My dad was involved in the cartels. You can look it up, and I can't tell you where I got it or they'll kill my family. Like, it was so convincing. And it's like, I was buying this in a money laundering scheme. That's why I was buying the boat. It's all cash. It came up. This could almost work. Like, this almost makes sense. And the thing is, there's a difference between what you suspect and what you can prove. And we had friggin' nothing. And we had a weird story, but it was convincing as hell. And we, so I called Gary in Australia, the charter boat captain, and I'm like, dude, what are we missing? And without skipping a beat, it's almost scary how fast he said it. I don't even think I finished the sentence. He's like, missing anchors, look for missing anchors. If there's murder on a boat, there's gonna be a missing anchor. Everybody thinks they invented the wheel. Everybody gets tied to an anchor. That's how they do it. And we go back to the boat for like the 20th time. Sure enough, been staring us in the face the whole time. There should have been 2 anchors on the bow. There was one. And so we hooked them the next day, and the whole house of cards fell down.
So what had they done? How had they?
So what they did is they lured him out to sea. They brought in this guy who's a Long Beach insane crip. But yeah, they got muscle. They went out. They lured him out to sea. They tasered them both. They threatened to beat her if he didn't sign. They threatened to taser him again if she didn't sign. And they tied him to the anchor, begging for their lives, and threw him overboard.
Was the intention just the capital gain? Did they just want the boat?
Yeah, they wanted the boat, and they also had a power of attorney indicating that they should have had access to their bank accounts too.
All money motivated. It was nothing sadistic.
Well, no, all money motivated. And then when we got the search warrant, we found an LAPD Interpol liaison card to a totally separate murder the year before in Mexico. A guy from here, from Southern California, named John Jarvie, who got into drugs. He was a pilot, had back issues. I mean, a lot of people have experienced that, where he goes back on painkillers. He was sober, goes back on painkillers, fucks him up, and he gives him $50,000 in cash. Skylar cut his throat.
Oh, wow. Did you watch this newest Zodiac doc?
I haven't, and here's my problem with Zodiac.
Please.
They never catch him, and
it's maddening.
It is maddening to me.
Well, the Zodiac doc is really, really well done, and I think it's exploring a different aspect, which I really hit home as the Zodiac, was a school teacher in Atascadero.
Wait, did they finally figure out who did it?
Oh, they know.
I didn't know that.
1,000% who it is.
Oh, he just got away with it.
He just got away with it.
Died before he got caught?
He died. He was on dialysis. He died at like 58.
Okay.
And why was he called that again?
He named himself that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Very smart guy. He was a champion diver. He was a scuba guy. He was an enormous man. He's a teacher in Atascadero. He meets these kids. There's 7 kids. The mom of the 7 kids' husband is in Atascadero State Mental Prison because the dad had molested the kids, or one daughter in particular.
Wow.
She's in so over her head. She's got 7 kids. This teacher shows up, and he starts taking them to the movies some nights. He's their teacher. She trusts him.
Okay.
He develops this relationship with the whole family. And what's neat about this doc is it's not focusing as much on him like the other ones have. It's this crazy thing where you can know somebody who's been so generous and benevolent, and this duality that can exist between what you think is a serial killer. Yeah. And then the absolute torture of getting presented evidence after evidence, but you know this man and he was kind to you. Ugh. And it's riveting. People want everyone to be a cartoon character of a serial killer.
Yeah.
They don't want it to be the teacher that was kind to you. And,
that's the thing.
That's what's, and to see what they had to deal with, like, there's the victims, but then there's this whole family that it tore them apart. And one brother finally admitted, no, it's him. It's incredible.
Okay,
it's incredible. It's heartbreaking for this family.
Yeah, well, Rex Huerman, that's the latest. That's the Gilgo Beach one. Another huge guy. That's more East Coast news, but he's kind of the modern, I think he represents the next wave, because he figured out a way to defeat modern forensic science. Like they they got him with a mito. They made a DNA hit on a hair. And it's mitochondrial DNA, so the numbers are like 1 in 50 as opposed to 1 in 18 octillion. But he killed probably 19, they think, and he was an architect in Midtown Manhattan, wife, kids, the whole deal. Yeah. And he would wrap them in burlap, which probably had something to do with fingerprints. And yeah, he got away with it for years and years. But so did my Golden State Killer case. That guy got away with it for years.
Yeah. And Zodiac, so he would teach the kids ciphers, right? He'd teach them how to do ciphers. Like you draw a grid, A, B, C, D, E, F, you drew a symbol and taught them how to write code letters. And he was submitting these to the San Francisco Chronicle, and they were running them on the front page. And there was these ciphers. They couldn't break. One of the ciphers got broke last year. 50 years long, his cipher didn't get cracked.
He was like, I'm
He was
the killer,
writing
I'm
nonstop.
giving-
I'm the Zodiac.
What?
Figure out this cipher. It'll tell you what I'm going to do next.
I gotta
mean,
watch
it was
it now.
so twisted.
Oh my God.
And he's a very smart dude and very competent and a pedophile, as we come to find out. And
Does
this
he
whole
kill all
sexual.
those kids?
He killed teenagers who would be making out at like makeout points.
Yeah, they're equal opportunity, these guys.
Oh my.
Boys, girls, women.
He was into self-aggrandizement, and really anyone would have. He killed a cab driver for no reason because he wanted to kill the guy in front of a movie poster of a movie he loved and he used to teach the kids. I mean, it is so dense with craziness.
Oh, I gotta watch it.
You gotta watch it.
Yeah.
And my heart to this family. I can't help but try to think of it in terms of addiction. And I think about like, are they like me buying Coke? Like, okay, we're buying Coke this time, but we're not going to buy Coke anymore after tomorrow. Are those deals being made in their head? Are they trying to quit?
Here's the difference in my mind is that, and I mean, look, everybody in my family's an addict. For the addict, we can have sympathy. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Stevenson, right? Like the duality of man. The vehicle he had to use was spontaneous transformation. Like Dr. Jekyll was a noble man working for science. Mr. Hyde was the monster that would kill. And when you know it turns you into something and you know that you're hurting other people, addicts only hurt themselves, typically, right? I mean, they can go on and do, but that's
there's
where the
collateral
real damage
damage,
is.
but in general.
Sure, there's collateral damage, but it's not predatory.
Right.
It's secondary.
I just wonder, are they trying to quit?
Yeah, is it like a compulsion and then they feel guilt?
Or they're like, I'm doing this till the day I get caught. I'm just so curious.
There's an arrogance that goes along with it that I don't think you see in addicts, and also sadism is an inherent part. Grandiosity is one of the it's a thing called the hair psychopathy checklist. It's like the most common traits of actual psychopaths, and grandiosity is on that list. And it's like the very first serial killer case I did was a guy who was a serial rapist in downtown Huntington Beach. He finally killed one of his victims named Victor Miranda Guerrero, and he was living in a tiny little place, and he had a notebook. And it was, he would write Victor King, and all these things like self-portraits with a crown on his head. I mean, just like textbook type stuff.
Yeah.
And addicts, it's a little different, right?
Yeah. Sure.
I only meant the element of trying to quit.
I think that for a lot of those guys, they get off on it so much that it's more the opposite. They can't wait to go out and do it again. I don't think they feel guilty about it at all.
Okay, I had some questions that have just kind of always been on my mind about someone with your job. How do you deal with the frustration of knowing you have someone and you don't have the evidence and you're not going to have it? What does that do to you? How do you compartmentalize that, or how do you process that?
The answer is not very well. I think I lost a lot of sleep over those.
I'm almost shocked there's not more vigilante justice.
Well,
I bet back in the day there was.
It's funny you raise that. I mean, people forget there's a social compact, and one of it is somebody murders your family member or somebody you love. The deal is we don't exact revenge because the state is supposed to do it for us.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people forget as we tack back to like early release. And I'm as pro-reform as anybody. Mm-hmm. But for the sexual predators and the really bad guys are the ones that unnecessarily hurt a family or a victim.
Is the biggest predictor, I have to imagine rapists are they're en route to that.
And all rapists don't wind up being serial killers, but virtually all serial killers were rapists. And they start out with like peeping or flashing, and they work their way up. They'll steal some panties, some underwear. The beef I have with the FBI definition on serial killer is it's too broad. It's 2 or more victims, by the same perpetrator at different events. And it's like, that encompasses gang members and mafia hitmen and drug dealers that get in beefs.
Right.
The real predatory guys are the sexual offenders.
I watched this great documentary about chess masters. And there's this very common pattern for chess masters. This happened to Bobby Fischer. It's happened to a lot of them. They spend their whole life anticipating doom, and they exercise their brain in that way. And when they are not concentrating on just a huge percentage of these chess masters become paranoids. And so it's a liability if all your focus. So are you aware that you have had a unique view of life? And do you attempt to correct for that?
A lot of bad guys.
Yeah.
You have a little bit of a misleading worldview, I might argue. In the same way, let me add one other one. So my wife's mom was a nurse. And she came to me on the first time we met and she said, "Oh, great. I'm glad I'm meeting you. You have to help me get Kristen off of birth control." And I said, "Well, I don't think that's my position to say whether or not she..." Do you know how many strokes I see at the hospital from birth control?
Wow.
And I said, "I bet you do. I bet you see more than anybody. That's who they come to."
Yeah.
But if we look up right now, car accident deaths per 100,000 and strokes from birth control, I would be more apt to get her to quit driving a car.
Yeah.
It's not a realistic, but I understand why to you it is.
No, I think you're exactly right. Of course. There's this nice old man that we were on the same schedule, and he would ride his bike past this elementary school in Manhattan Beach as I'd be on my way to work. Yeah. And for years, I'd pass by this guy like a couple times a week. We were on the exact same schedule. Yeah. And after about a couple months in sexual assault, it was like, there's that freaking pervert. I know what he's up to. You know, like you definitely get jaded for sure. Yeah. And you're right. I would have a very skewed worldview.
And I don't think anyone couldn't. So I have zero judgment.
It'd be weird if you didn't.
I'm skewed by my weird experience in life, right? I travel around and meet a bunch of artists all the time. I think the world's full of creative, wonderful people. I'm delusional, right? We're all kind of Yeah.
I mean, I've stepped over 100 dead bodies over the course of my job. And that definitely gives you a viewpoint there.
Now, here's a great question. So I have a tolerance and an appetite and a capacity to understand gnarly stuff still needs to go on in life. People got to do gnarly jobs. Some cop answers a call to domestic disturbance and they walk through a door to a house they've never been in. They know violence is happening. That is a very intense, gnarly situation, and we need people to go do that.
Yeah.
I think some people have lost their appetite for the reality of what has to go on.
They have.
And so to those people, I'd argue like, hey, you have to have some understanding that like gnarly shit's got to get done. And guess what? Gnarly shit getting done goes wrong often.
Right.
You have to have some tolerance for how ugly and gnarly all this is.
And split-second decisions, too, that the police are put in all the time.
And that is not to excuse any of the clearly racially motivated, horrific things that have happened. Just everything's happening. Yeah. And you have to have some tolerance for this. And you also have to have some self-correcting if you're you. Yeah. And I'm wondering how one even does that.
You know, I scuba dive a ton. And I still surf every morning I can, even though I'm getting rickety in my old age. But this is going to sound weird to say. I started shark diving a few years ago. Nothing quiets your mind more than cageless shark diving. And it's a lot safer than anybody would think. And sharks get a bad rap. But
I'll take your word for it.
I'm going to Cuba in 2 weeks to go shark diving there, and it is a friggin' blast. And when you're down there, that's been really zen for me. And like you, I got to be very careful about using anything chemical to balance that out, because that's a very slippery slope in that job.
Yes. Well, okay, great. That was one of my questions. Funny enough, the rate of domestic violence is really rough. It's over-indexed. The rate of alcoholism is really fucking high among police officers. Do all those same things plague DAs?
Yes. I don't think to the same degree, though, as cops. And I think that we still have it a lot better than they do. And it's rough to be a police officer right now. You're putting your life on the line for $80,000 a year in a community where
you're hated,
where the community is being taught to hate you. That's, I think, what really gets them.
As you even pointed out in the book, like most of your colleagues aren't in thriving long-term relationships.
No, not in homicide. They're not. And my mentors, and I don't really mention this because I kept them out. The rule is you're either a genius, and there are a few that came through the unit that are able to balance that and be great husbands, wives, and fathers and mothers. But generally, you go into that unit, if you're single when you go in, you're single when you come out. And if you're married, you're probably getting divorced.
Yeah.
Because you can't do the job. I mean, at least me, I wasn't smart enough to have like such good bandwidth on both. And I decided that I had to go all in.
Well, how can you be at dinner not thinking about this thing that has to get done in order to get this person off the street? Like, to be able to leave that at the valet is a tall order.
Yeah, when you have the responsibility to the moms, that's what it always came back to me, is when you meet the mom and they want you to bring it home for them. That's, and for me, I'd wake up in the middle of the night. What's hard about the dinners is when you get the call outs. I talk about this in the book. I had a notorious case out of Costa Mesa, and I got the call in the middle of the woman I was dating at the time. It was her birthday. Oof. And for me, being awesome boyfriend that I was, it was just like, all right, we're out. That's tough on relationships, but in retrospect, I was a lousy romantic partner for a lot of that time.
Obviously, it's hard to watch people are guilty and you don't have the evidence. But what about the opposite? Is there ever a time where you're like, God, I hope it's the right one?
So that's a great question, and thank you for asking me that. The answer is no, because your ethical obligation, your sacrosanct duty is to do justice.
Yeah.
And it's not to get convictions. And when you entertain a doubt, you are, especially if you're working for a good office like I was back then, it is understood as soon as you say, I have a doubt. But a lot of times it's not just whether the person did it or not. A lot of times it's on an enhancement. Like I had a case where we go and it was a very wealthy couple, Newport Beach, about to get divorced. And I filed murder for financial gain because you only need any part of the motive being financial that satisfies the element. And the guy was so rich, we were afraid he was going to run anyway. And it's like UK citizenship and all that. And then we get into the computers. And as soon as the forensic analysis comes back, like 6 weeks later, FBI, so maybe 8 weeks if we were asking for it in 4. The real problem is he was going out, and I'll put this correctly, visiting the services of sex workers, I believe is the politically correct, and he was bringing home STDs. That's what they were fighting about. So now I knew what they were fighting about, and it wasn't money. And we also learned in the course of investigation, each side of the family had tons of cash. So I had to dismiss that right away, ethically, even though concerned that he might run. And what did he do? He frickin' ran. But yeah, so ethically, whenever you entertain a doubt, you gotta dump it. And I had another one, a guy actually charged with murder. He was a choker. So he had a whole history of domestic violence where he would choke his ex-girlfriends and ex-wives. So it was his third fiance, and they get in a big argument, and she's found dead. He calls 911. The rigor's already set in. She's been dead for hours. She had bruising to her strap muscles, which happens in strangulation. Petechial hemorrhaging in the eyes, which is when the blood vessels burst. There's always telltale signs for when somebody's been strangled. So he fought with her, choked her, cause of death was asphyxia, right? Easy, charge him with murder. We get the tox back. Toxicological results for blood, turns out she took about 500 sleeping pills. And you die of asphyxia from sleeping.
Right, yeah. Stop breathing.
So that's one, had to dump it right away. Immediately, you don't pass go, you immediately call the court, you go in and you dismiss it. We prosecuted him for the domestic violence. He went to prison for that. But yeah, so that's part of the job.
Yeah.
Okay, is murder reflective of the time and culture the way everything is? Has murder changed? Is there a trend in murder? Is there a style in murder? Has it changed since the 80s?
That's a really interesting question. So murder itself, I think, the motives have been the same for 100,000 years. Jealousy, greed, anger, lust. It's the same. It's like the 4 horsemen that you keep seeing over and over. Throw a little booze in there.
Yeah.
4th of July barbecue, dispute with the neighbor. Next thing you know, the gun comes out and somebody gets killed. So it's the same thing over and over again. What we're seeing now, and I think that this is a kind of a weird byproduct of the fascination with true crime, is you're getting guys like Rex Heuermann who are figuring out they don't want to get caught, so they're getting smarter about it, almost like a Dexter type thing. And that's a new thing. Most of them aren't smart enough. The vast majority of murders are one-offs. It's situational,
right,
never to be repeated again. But for the real predators, they are getting smarter. So that part is a yes. There's also social media impact on the way some of the psychopaths are able to manipulate the public. And we've just seen a big example of that. And I don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole, but the Menendez brothers, that's a fascinating thing. We got Netflix, and we've got this outpouring of people that feel very, very strongly because they think they were sexually abused. Yeah. Therefore, we got to let them go. And it's a dicey area.
In keeping with my normal trying to always find the middle ground, what's interesting is there's 2 options on the table in this debate. They either were not molested and they belong there, or they were molested and they don't belong there. Here's my position.
They're molested and they still belong there. I know where you're going,
yes.
Right? Yes.
I watched the trial, and what is undeniable is their testimony would be seen so much differently today than it was then. And I'm grateful it would be seen the way it should be today.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that was a fucked up family, and I think really bad shit happened to them. I don't think either of them are that good of actors. Yep. And I know that world, and I believe them.
Yep.
Does that mean you can cut down mom with a shotgun?
And therein lies the rub,
Right.
as they say. So, and remember, and this is like one of those things that forensically, it's Mossberg 12 gauge. That is a 6 cartridge weapon, and there were 13 shots.
And it takes a while to load a shotgun.
It sure does. It takes
It's
a
a
while
pain
to
in the
load a
ass. You
shotgun.
cut your thumb sticking
that's right.
them in
It's
there.
a pain in the ass, and they'd practice with them. They bought them with fake IDs. But Lau Menendez went out to that car, got ammo, reloaded the shotgun, and literally put the gun to his mom's face and blew her face off. So we can say everything we want about whatever Jose did or didn't do.
Yeah.
Great. Unless you're after the money, why do you kill mom? You know, and in that debate, nobody will come up with a good answer.
How about this? I can even make that argument. You were supposed to protect me.
Right.
You turned your eye. You could have saved both of us from all this.
Exactly right.
Still fine.
But then we're talking about a revenge killing, not self-defense.
Yeah.
Right?
So it's just interesting. Again, to me, what's frustrating is it lines up the way every fucking thing lines up, which is it's binary. You're on this side or you're on that side. And no one's approaching like...
Exactly right.
Well, no, because your middle ground also has a flip, right? Your middle is they're abused, they should serve time, and maybe it's time to let them out.
Yeah, and that's
fine.
That's not an illegitimate position at all.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, they've
I'm like,
been in there
I
for
think
30
they've
years.
done enough.
They're not strangers. They killed their parents. They raised them. I've got no issue with that.
Yeah.
My problem is the zeal that everybody's gone into it with. They've all forgotten the first trial, and they've all forgotten how Lau was bragging about how he lied on the stand in the first one. There's so many nuanced pieces like reloading and shooting mom in the face.
Buying 2 Porsches and Rolexes. I mean, a lot of it.
A spending spree that started 4 days after the murders, all that, right?
Yeah,
it's all rough.
Not
But
good.
they didn't
No one's, I mean, I guess some people maybe are
Some
saying
people
it's good.
love them. Like, some people love them.
Bill Maher has a great thing, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's brilliant. It's basically like America never reacts, it just overreacts.
Right, we don't have act. We have overreact.
Which is exactly what you were just saying. There's a middle ground that everybody ignores.
It's because everything has to line up politically. So it's like all of a sudden, once you find out what your identity is, what's our team doing? Well, I don't want to lose my team. It's not a coincidence you're presented with 2 options because there's 2 fucking parties and there's 2 identities in this country.
Which is madness.
It is madness. COVID, you got to act like there's not a disease to be a member of your group.
Right.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
You got to act like we got to be separated forever to be a member of your group. You can't let it go. Like
what happened to the great rational middle that I still think exists? Like,
It does.
It does.
And see, with juries, that's a job as a DA. You have to get a disparate group of people who are across the spectrum and get them to agree on something basic, especially for this stuff, for murder. This stuff predates Democrats and Republicans. It predates empires and kings. This goes back to like Hammurabi cuneiform, like what happens when you kill somebody? Well, there's degrees of badness in it. And
one of the first laws they wrote down.
Literally the first laws dealt with killing people.
Yes.
And it's like the 10 Commandments there's a lot of like, that's a sequel to a lot of like first writings. How do we deal with each other as human beings? And I can tell you from my experience, the grief of a mom or a dad losing a kid to murder is the same now as it has ever been. And that like together as a society, like if we can't all agree on that, we're lost.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know, maybe I think that might have something to do with the fascination in true crime because it's kind of a refuge where people can get away from the screaming heads. It's one of the last areas where like people, regardless of their political affiliation, can agree.
Yeah. Have you been involved in any penis choppings offs?
I have been involved in penis choppings offs.
You have?
No, you haven't.
Oh, yeah.
I thought you were being funny.
I was kind of being funny, but also I
Oh,
wondered.
no, I've had a couple.
What?
A couple.
A couple?
Yeah, I've been involved in a couple. But my last trial was my Hussein Nayeri case. And this is actually a great story. I mean, it's
Good
a
one to
horrific
go
story.
on. Yeah.
It was a marijuana dispensary owner gets kidnapped, and the marijuana world in California is still like the Wild West. So the way it works is you can't bank from marijuana proceeds. So it's all cash.
Really quick so people understand, the federal government hasn't legalized it. So any proceeds that were in a federally FDIC-insured bank, you could go in and get all the money.
So that F,
so it's a cash business.
That F in the FDIC stands for federal, which is a federal crime. So they can't use Visa, MasterCard, they can't do it. So we legalized marijuana in the state of California without a plan in effect to deal with that. And so the result is it's all cash.
Don't you immediately open up the door to an actual narco trafficker saying, I own a dispensary. Here's how I explain this $1 million of cash. I put it in the bank.
Oh, those guys are all over the dispensaries.
Yeah,
by the way.
yeah,
The
'cause now they have
the
this-
cartels are involved in so many dispensaries in California. It's a problem.
It's just sitting there as a great laundering situation.
Yeah. So, but you got legitimate business guys that are coming in and they're squeezing out and they're lowering the margins for the criminal element that's been responsible for that business. It's like the old bootleggers for years and years. Like those guys weren't Seagram's whiskey makers. You know, they were criminals that were willing to, you know, fill the need of bootlegging back in the 30s and all that. So as a result, the bad guys in the marijuana world know who's selling a lot of product and they know who's got a big pile of cash at the end of every day. So this guy he owns a dispensary in Santa Ana, totally legit, super licensed. And in fact, the guy didn't even use weed himself. So he's like a legit business guy. And they put trackers on his car and they surveilled him and they took him. He was out in the desert on a meaningless trip with a friend, and they got it in their little brains that must be where he's burying Alibaba's treasure. So they kidnap him out of Newport, they drive him out, they torture him the whole way out. They get him to the GPS coordinates where they'd stopped. They're like, give us the money. And he's like, I've told you for the last time, the money's in the safe because why wouldn't it be in the freaking safe?
Yeah. They make safes. I don't need to use the desert.
Yeah.
And but again, psychopath in love with his own brilliance. He wound up. They've tortured him, and he's like, for the last time, it's in the office. It's not out here. So he's like, "Fuck you," and he cut off his penis, and he took it with him. So
What?
they also kidnapped his roommate's girlfriend. So imagine this. She's along for the ride, basically. They didn't torture her. So in the middle of the Mojave Desert, they dump her out, and they're still bound. They throw a knife down, and they're like, if you can cut your way out, you might be able to get out. If you can't, you can just fucking die. That's how they left. So the van drives off. So she manages to get this blindfold off and sees lights off in the distance, and she's in her pajamas and goes running through the California desert. First car she sees is an off-duty sheriff's deputy going to work. Oh my God. And so they're able to get to him before he dies. And now the search is on. And so long story short, our mastermind fled back to Iran, where he was originally from. And he grew up in California, a California kid, but he still had citizenship. And he still had family back there.
We don't have a great extradition policy with Iran.
Not so good. Not so good.
Yeah.
They're not real big on that. So, which is a huge problem. So we've got the mastermind of this thing. We wound up, and this is kind of cool. They do a canvas of the scene. So a canvas is just when the cops go and knock on doors, right? So they knock on a door. And you're old enough to remember Bewitched. You're too young to remember
I know
Bewitched. Do you remember?
Bewitched,
Mrs.
yes,
Kravitz, always
yes.
looking out, knows there's
Monica's
witches in the house.
59 years old. Can you believe? Look how good she looks.
They've got a neighbor who, and you never get anything on a canvas. It's like when you're out of leads, like it's a due diligence thing. But she's like, as a matter of fact, I did see something. And I saw these boys, it looked like two went up on a ladder into the house where the kidnapping happened. But I didn't see them come out, and they were wearing hard hats that looked too clean to be real. And the cops are like, please tell us you can describe the truck. And she's like, well, would the license plate do? She wrote down the plate number. And of all the brilliance and all the planning that went into this, one of the idiots involved in this thing was like, we had a really smart psychopath guy, and he had helpers. And one of the helpers was a stoned
you got to do everything
moron.
yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why if you're going to kidnap somebody, do it
Cut
yourself.
someone's penis off. You better be doing the whole thing.
So anyway, he used his own truck for that event, and we were able to. So we catch one of them. The other guy flees to Iran, and we get pretty much everybody else, including the wife of the mastermind. So we've got her. She was in law school at the time.
Oh my God.
And so now the game became, can we lure this guy out of Iran? So we basically, it was one of the coolest things I ever got to do as a DA. So we flipped her to help us lure him into the Czech Republic. And I still can't believe it worked, but we threw a net on him, the Czech border police. And that was a case where the FBI were heroes. So the Czech Republic, which will extradite, so the former Soviet countries absolutely will extradite to the U.S. because they actually trust our legal system. The UK is terrible. France is even worse. Spain, not so good.
Really?
Surprisingly so, but pain in the ass to get anybody out of those countries. So we could pick any country in the world. The Czechs, we get him here. Extradition is successful. We put handcuffs on him in New York, transport him back. We're preparing for trial, and he friggin' escapes from the Orange County Jail with two guys that were in there for murder, and they were on the loose. You read headlines about this back in the day. You don't remember, but for a week they're out, and I'm thinking, everybody.
You got this guy out of Iran. Now he's.
Oh yeah.
We lost him. You must want to kill
yeah.
yourself. I don't know how present you were at whatever girlfriend's birthday it was happening that week, but I'm sure you were not fucking thinking about.
I was not popular either. So he's out, and he left my photo on his bunk along with my trial partner Heather Brown, who I love to death. Left our pictures on his bunk, and it was Escape from Alcatraz. They tunneled out through these plumbing tunnels behind, rappelled off the roof. It's like literally something out of a movie. Leaves my photo on his bunk. And Iran, a lot of people don't know this, have pretty warm diplomatic relations with Mexico because they're both OPEC countries. And they have a full-blown embassy in Tijuana, like about 15 minutes from the border. So all he has to do is head south. So I'm convinced the guy we spent a year outsmarting that we got outsmarted by, and instead, for whatever reason, he went north. And so we got him in San Francisco. A week later, they recaptured him. And that was my last trial as a prosecutor, and he took the stand. And that was my final question to him was, dude, tell us, why couldn't you just leave it there and give the poor guy a chance that it would be reattached? And
you asked that was my final question. Stenographer had to type that question.
And he was enraged by that question. I mean, he was so pissed, which is the goal. You want the violent guys to flash in front of the jury, which allowed me to argue in the end, ladies and gentlemen, I asked him something he didn't like, and his answer was, "You're done. Personally, you're done. You're done."
You got a movie moment out of it?
I had a movie moment out of it. My last
You can't handle the truth. You can't handle the truth.
It was so great. And then the beauty is you connect that to closing, where it's like, ladies and gentlemen, think about this. In between you, a group of people who are deciding his fate, a Superior Court judge, and in a courtroom full of armed guards and bailiffs, he
couldn't handle it.
Threatens to kill me.
Yeah.
Or whatever you're done means.
Yeah.
Imagine what he's like in the back of a van when he's not getting the $1 million that he thought was buried out there.
Nuts.
Yeah. So Hussein Nairi. Yeah.
Did he ever say what he did with the penis? Did he Lorraine Bobbitt it and chuck it out the window of the van?
We flipped one of the three guys in the van, and he said they threw it out the window down the road. Now I never called him to testify, but it was one of the co-conspirators.
Weird.
Yeah.
What does one do if they're walking down the side of the road and they see a penis there? I mean, immediately you should call the authorities, right? No one misplaces them intentionally.
Yeah.
Well, Matt Murphy, this was awesome. The Book of Murder, A Prosecutor's Journey Through Love and Death. There are a dozen of those stories in there, as well as your own. And what else I want to add about it is it's a great education on a district attorney's job. You learn a lot about jurisprudence while you're hearing about all these crazy cases.
Hopefully in an interesting way for the reader. The Audible's doing really well. I narrated it myself, learned I write in tongue twisters, but thank you for saying that.
Yeah, so everyone check out the Book of Murder, and I look forward to your next book. This has been incredible. Thank you so much.
I had a blast, guys. I really did.
All right, good. I sure hope there weren't any mistakes in that episode, but we'll find out when my mom, Mrs. Monica, comes in and tells us what was wrong. Just real quick, what if people do this? Some people wear sunglasses inside.
Anna Wintour.
Yeah, so you might like it. What if I wore sunglasses?
I don't like not being able to see your eyes.
Yeah, it's a bad look for me, but just what if? Try to wrap your head around the fact that I'm the type of guy that I'm always wearing my shades, you know? I'll be the dude in my shade. I'm always in my shades. I should have worn my leather.
This is tricky, okay? This is a deep...
This can change exactly how you feel about somebody, right? This little accoutrement.
You putting that on is going to change your whole personality, right?
Right.
So what do I do if I hate your new personality, but I love you? What happens? What happens?
Yeah.
I mean, really, people do change over time.
Well, also, remember my uncle, he had that procedure for his epilepsy where they warned he and his wife, he may have a radical shift in his personality. That was on the table.
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
Do you have a friend, though, that had do you think, a radical shift in their personality? Because I could be that friend to some degree from where I grew up.
To those people?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Wow, this guy's he's sober and he's liberal.
Do you think your personality's changed? Because those aren't, to me, personality things. They are... We might confuse them as personality things, but those are beliefs and some just ways of walking through the world.
Yeah. And I imagine I have a bias where it's like, I think I'm aware of the things I've gotten better at, and I'm not necessarily sure which ones I've gotten worse at.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people that were friends with me in my early 20s, like they got me, but I would alienate certain people, or I was too provocative, or I'd get drunk.
Yeah.
And then I think a lot of my friends were often having to apologize for who I was to their friends that didn't know me. I think it was a little too much for some people. So of course I would chalk that up as like, well, now I'm better.
Right.
But
You've
maybe
calmed down
some
a bit.
people would be like, he's boring. Now I like the guy that was a little crazy.
Right.
This guy's a fucking yawn fest now. I just thought of an idea for a furniture line called, what word did I just say? 'Cause I
Yawn
lost-
Fest. You want to do Yarn Fest?
I want to do yawn furniture, like lawn furniture,
Oh.
but it's comfy furniture for taking a nap in.
I
It's
like
called
that.
Yawn furniture.
Is it still for outside? I think it should be.
Sure. I feel like you must be in a really good mood today because you have your hair up and you have a bow in. And that to me is usually a cue. Like you got up this morning and you're like, I feel pretty good. I'm going to do a thing. And now here it is.
That's a great guess. That's not what happened.
Okay.
I put my hair, I just grabbed the first clip I saw and put my hair up to do my makeup.
Yes.
And then when I was done with my makeup, I was about to take it down and I thought, oh, I'll just leave my clip in.
It landed right.
It landed right. It's hard to,
Sometimes you just get lucky, right?
it's hit or miss.
Throw it up and then you pull off an orna.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I should have taken
Accidental
one braid
perfection.
out. That's right. Okay, so I guess you don't really want to talk too much about personalities.
No, I love talking about personalities. Do you think you've changed a lot?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I did an awesome podcast yesterday called She Pivots.
Okay, great.
It was really fun. Awesome host, Emily Sussman. And she asked me what my personality was like as a kid. Like, I must have been very wanting a lot
Center
of
of attention.
attention. Yes, because I went into entertainment.
Yeah.
And I could not be further from I was so shy.
You were shy.
So shy.
But you always made a lot of friends. So that's a little,
I did make friends. I did it
but quietly and slowly.
Right. I did it in the way I still make friends. Like I'm not at a party out
taking huge swings like
taking
me.
big swings, making loud noises and
Yeah,
like
drawing attention.
I'm not drawing attention. You know, I hate that. I
Right.
hate audience participation. And like Jess is very like you, right? Like
yeah. Here I am.
Yeah. And I love that. Like I do joke with him though that the first time I ever met him ever was at one of the Hanson Christmas parties. And he was like had his like shirt off or something. It was doing a dance.
I think those heightened events can bring out an even heightened version of himself. So
And I was like,
this guy's dangerous.
I'm scared of that person. I'm
Yeah.
not, but I want distance from that person.
Yep. And I think that's what a lot of people's reaction to me was in my 20s.
Yeah. Well, and that's so funny because I obviously have a pattern of thinking like, I'm scared of that. I don't want that near me. And then I always find my way towards those people.
Moth to the Flame, Germany.
Opposites attract.
Yeah, laws of attraction.
Germany.
Remember that? I read that fascinating article about how they're so buttoned up and responsible, and yet they get drawn to the chaos.
Mixed messies.
Inexplicable.
One of our old school go-tos.
Our tropes.
Anyway, so I used to be very shy
Yeah.
and I'm not shy anymore.
Oh, congratulations. But I can't imagine anyone would miss your shyness.
Ooh, that's a great question. My mom probably misses it because I was probably nicer.
I know what you're about to say, and
Nicer?
I don't think you've ever been shy to your mom.
Well, no, I wasn't, but I was stuck to her hip.
Okay.
Like-
that would have been nice. Yeah, like a little monkey.
Yeah, but actually this is probably a lesson for her. She probably didn't like that. She was probably like, can you like go away? No, she never said that to me. But she was probably like, I need some space. I've been working all day and then there's just a kid here.
Yeah, stuck, glued to me.
Glued.
Oh, that's sweet. You
Yeah.
were glued to Nermie?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, mainly in public.
Okay.
'Cause
You
I
kind of
didn't-
hide behind her body the way kids do.
I guess. She would describe it as, it was like always kind of glued to her.
My cousins Mandy and Kelly, who are the funnest people on planet Earth, you'll remember they visited not
Yeah,
too long
they're
ago, and we had a
very fun.
blast. Mandy is the younger sister, and she has the same personality I do, right? Look at me. And then Kelly, who's my exact age, was very, very shy. And she would just move through the world hiding behind Mandy at all times, but she was much bigger. But I have such a clear image in my head of anytime we would leave our little bubble and be at a Kmart or a thing, Kelly would be behind Mandy. Like, go ahead, you do all this stuff I don't want to do for us.
Interesting. It's, again, maybe a birth order thing.
Oh my God, you would have loved this. So the update no one's asking for is I went to the dentist.
Oh, right.
And my hygienist was 5X's into astrology as you are.
Wow.
And she was really mad that you hadn't told me what my rising was. But
I've asked you.
I said, I think she has. I think she made me take a test to find out my
That's
rising, but
right.
I forgot it. I only remember Capricorn. But she was a Capricorn, but she had like 5. And this is the thing about you guys that are really into it. All of a sudden you have like all the signs because she's like, I'm such and such rising and I'm this waning and I'm blah. And I'm like, well, you got now a fourth of the signs.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's
I
real.
loved her, by the way. Very fun hygienist. She was
Great.
swearing and stuff, which I love.
That's fun.
And of course, I asked her because it had been almost to the day 7 years since I had been there last time.
Sure. Yeah.
And she was like, whoa, 7 years. I go, I know. And I'm going to ask you to do something that's really maybe even impossible to do because you already know the 7 years. But I'm going to ask you to pretend you don't know that and objectively assess my mouth to see how long you think it's been. Because this is what I asked last time I was here. And this is when she started swearing. She was like, oh my God, shit, yeah. You're just genetically lucky. You don't have any tartar. She's like, you have no tartar. And you know what she told me, which I find really fascinating, is remember my calcium heart score, which I brag about all the time.
Yeah, you do a lot of bragging.
I do a lot of bragging. It's unbecoming of a gentleman.
Do you think that's a personality change or has that always been there?
Well, no, in fact, what I was going to say, the grody part of myself that I think is diminished is I used to, if not directly brag, I was really trying to brag all the time.
Okay, so that's gone down.
It's gone down.
That's good.
And even now there's a zone of things I'll brag about. And there are things that I should be in trouble for, but I'm not. So that's the brag. So my calcium score, I was terrified to get it because of my diet. It's just meat. Mm-hmm. And so I was so relieved and delighted that it was 0.
Yeah.
Similarly, I haven't been to the dentist in 7 years. I've been one time in 17 years
That's disgusting.
because it was 10 years before the last trip. I know, it's foul. Everyone is throwing up their tuna sandwich in their car right now. I am bragging about it. And then here's my other justification. Because this is what I told her. She's like, yeah, some people genetically are lucky. They don't build up a lot of tartar, and that's you. And I said, I'm going to take it because I have some other genetic stuff that's like psoriatic arthritis and stuff.
Sure.
So like these things that I have that are just blessings from above.
Yeah.
My teeth.
We all have a grab bag.
Yes. What a great genetic lottery I hit with my teeth.
Yeah, that's
I'm
nice.
really lucky because I hate
Congrats.
going.
Speaking of bragging,
Yeah.
something that you've bragged about recently that I've been excited to bring up. So the cognitive test.
Oh, yes. Now it's your turn in the catbird seat.
But there was a huge revelation that happened. I got my test results back.
Uh-huh.
Hour and a half long with Dr. Richard Isaacson.
Mhm.
Fascinating. All the cholesterol stuff. I started my statin. I told you that.
Oh, right.
All the cholesterol stuff, all the other stuff. Turns out, minus the cholesterol, which is really, really, really bad, but we're working on it. Everything's tip top.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
That's
everything's great. My liver's great, which I was worried about.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah, but it's fine. So I can keep powering through.
You're built for it.
Then the cognitive test results. And of course, I was very anxious about this part of it.
Yeah, you thought you'd convince yourself you did bad.
Yeah, even during it, I think I said on here, I said, this is very, very humbling.
Mm-hmm.
And she said I had had people walk out and we got it, and I was like, yeah, this is really bad. I'm doing horribly. And then when and what I didn't even realize, we were taking an IQ test. I didn't realize that.
Were we?
Yes, the number is an IQ score.
It is? Because there was none of the fun riddles that I love from
Well,
IQ
maybe the
test.
kid ones, maybe different.
No. The standard, like to get into Mensa IQ test, has a ton of computation and long form pattern recognition and prediction.
Well, this is pattern. There was a lot of pattern. Or no, maybe not pattern recognition.
There was identifying, but there was no. It's not like they would go ADH. What's the next letter? I love
that's
those.
true. Okay, well, whatever. Anyway,
right.
it is what it is.
Okay. So it was an IQ test?
Yeah.
Why didn't he give us an actual number? Did he give you a number?
He did.
He gave you a number?
That's my whole thing.
Okay.
Okay, so he said, cognitive test, don't worry, your cholesterol hasn't affected your brain yet.
Or what if you were
It
even
has.
smarter?
Okay, well, we'll get to that. So he said, hasn't affected your brain yet. You did fantastic. The guy, who evaluates it said words like superior, excellent, wow. So I was just so relieved at this.
Yes, of course.
And he said, you did a teeny bit better than your co-host. And I said, yes, this is so exciting. He's been bragging so much.
Yes, yes.
And he said, well, actually, I don't have the numbers. One of you did a little bit better. I was like,
Okay, so one of us did a little
And I
better.
said, oh, man, well, if it was him, I think this is because of the seahorse and racism.
Uh-huh, sure.
And there was an Indian man also on the call, and I was asking him about seahorses. He also was very hazy.
Really?
Yeah, he was like, sea monkeys.
Wait, you had 2 people on your call?
I had like 8 people on my call.
Why did I only have 1?
I think I'm a very interesting case.
Oh, wow. They
He
brought in
did
the...
say I'm an interesting case.
Okay.
Okay, so anyway, while I was commiserating with the Indian man
Yeah.
on seahorse, sea monkeys, Dr. Isaacson told Holly to pull up our actual numbers.
Okay.
And when he was doing it, he goes, oh my God, are you serious?
It took his breath away?
Holly, are you serious? Is this real? We scored the exact same score
Oh, my God. What could
to
be?
the 10th of a point.
Oh, my God. Nothing could be better.
Nothing.
No one's hurt feelings.
I know.
Yeah.
I think my dad did that for us. And obviously we both definitely scored differently in parts, but it all added up to the
That's kinda
exact
crazy.
same number.
Because again, there's all these columns of intelligence, and some of them I know I did terrible on. So the fact that like our terrible things evened out to
It's
be the
crazy.
same. So they give you an IQ score. We'd
Yeah.
cut it out, but
Yeah, I
want.
will. I wrote it down, but now I forget it. But hold on, I sent it to
I still
Eric.
don't think it's an IQ test, but I'm gonna, unless it's great, then I'm gonna say it's a really good IQ test. Do you know what I'm saying though? Where you have to get those really
I
good
don't.
riddles.
This is an IQ test.
Okay, sorry. Felt like a memory test.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Our number is.
First, before you tell me, have you taken a bunch of IQ tests? I've taken a bunch.
So I told my mom the number.
Yeah.
And my dad. I was like, good news is my brain is doing well. This, whatever. I explained the whole thing and I was like, this is my score. And my dad was like, yay, that's great. And my mom was like, well, when you were 5, you got 5 points higher than that.
Uh-huh.
Or 7, when I was 7. So
Okay.
I was like, okay, well,
Okay,
she's
so
keeping me humble, you
Yeah.
know? Wait, hold on.
Yeah, reject that. I'm not trying to make you mad. This is my own self-preservation.
That was your score.
Okay.
I don't know what to tell you.
That's lower than I want.
Yeah, and actually, I wasn't going to say this, but now I'm going to say this based on
My reaction.
your reaction.
Okay.
To me, it's so telling about men and women.
Okay.
Because I'm taking this test and I'm like, I'm fucking this up. I'm doing so badly.
Oh, right.
Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. I'm stupid.
The self-doubt.
Yeah. And then my score is
Exemplary.
high. And I think men don't do that as much. Or let's take you who ended up with the exact same score as me.
Okay. This is a great comp.
Because after we talked after your test and you didn't think that. I mean, you weren't like, I did amazing, but
I
you
wasn't.
weren't.
Remember, there were quite a few that I thought I did bad on. I don't think I was like overly bullish about it. I thought I definitely nailed a few things. That F thing, I bragged about that.
Right.
Yeah.
You did some bragging.
Yeah, I
before
didn't
you
feel
got
like
your
you
score.
for sure. On the
Yeah.
spectrum, I didn't feel like you.
Yeah. So I just think it's an interesting takeaway
Yeah.
of
doubt and confidence.
How men and women walk through the world, and when they're put through tests, like what is happening in their brains.
I'm teeming with testosterone, which like is the chemical that convinces you can do things you can't.
Right. And it's just funny.
I would
Yeah.
say my brain was more what you were thinking, Monica, after I took the test.
Right. As a comp, we got the same score, which is why I can say that. Because I didn't do poorly.
Right. And yet you thought you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wish I could do these things with more confidence.
Right.
Like borrow some of that feeling.
I wonder, like if we dug into it, what's under that? You know, is it for you that being smart is a very defining characteristic, and so here's this thing that has the potential to destroy your identity? I'm just throwing something out. This isn't what I think per se, but I'm just like spitballing now. Is it that the stakes were higher for you? Whereas for me, it's like, well, I know I'm going to tank a lot of this, and I
don't. In fact, that's what our fight just now was. You're like, I reject that number. I'm higher than that.
Well, because I've gotten better scores than that. And so, of course, I'm going to believe the one that made me seem the smartest. That's like my self-interest.
Yeah, so you don't have what you're saying you have. You think you believe
You're right.
and think.
That's a paradox.
Yeah.
It's a paradox. Yeah, I don't know.
I think also like women, a lot of girls are told like, oh, like girls don't score as high on tests, or girls aren't good at math, or girls aren't X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And
STEM.
so, yeah, I am in there thinking like, well, I mean, it's all subconscious, but it's like, yeah, I can't be very good at this.
Yeah. And it'd be interesting to know what young girls now, because, yeah, when you grew up, the admission rate for men in STEM at universities was still in the 80s probably, right? But now it's completely flipped. So now like 2/3 of girls are getting into college and only 1/3 of boys, or whatever the number is. Pretty crazy now.
Yeah.
I watched the, I guess it was a holiday concert
Oh.
last night at Lincoln School.
Oh, nice.
And as you would expect, lots of bawling.
Yeah.
I'm watching all these little girls. It's
Yeah.
all girls school.
So cute.
And they're singing, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And I'm crying.
Yep.
And then I look at Krista at one point and I go, you know, daughters are really the best thing this planet has to offer. They're the best thing that this planet has to offer is little daughters.
Yeah.
Fuck me. They're all, I was looking at all of them. They're so cute and, oh, yeah.
Gotta protect them.
Yeah. Oh, man, it was so touching. I was also tripping the fuck out that I have a daughter in a Catholic school outfit. Like in a bazillion years,
That is so funny.
that is not what my fantasy of having kids was.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, it was great.
That's sweet. Do you think a lot of men feel that way?
About daughters, I think a lot of men want to have a son. I mean, I could spitball for an hour on why that is, just historically, what that has meant until recently. But the second you have a daughter, every man I know that has daughters,
Right.
the first thing we say to each other is like, aren't we so fucking lucky? Like, we got so lucky that we have
Yeah.
these girls. And you know that study that just came out that adds like 1.5 years to your life per daughter you have, and it's cumulative. Like, it does something very good for us.
Stay tuned for more Armchair Expert, if you dare.
Okay, we're going to hit pause on the fact check to thank our presenting sponsor, Amazon Prime. Prime has you covered with movies, music, and everything you could possibly need to make the holidays perfect. Whatever you're into, it's on Prime.
We love Prime. They literally have everything.
They have everything. They totally do. Perfect example. If you're traveling for the holidays, you've got to be ready for anything on your trip.
Yeah, like escaping LA and Thanksgiving traffic.
Oh, big time. If you're driving or taking a flight in the next few weeks, you might hit traffic or delays. And if or when that happens, you need fun stuff to pass the time, especially if you're traveling with kids like we are, like a season of a TV show to binge, maybe a video game. Prime has tons of great games.
And when someone else is hosting you, you have to show up with a little something. It's just what you do.
Yeah, when you're trying to solve the riddle of what can I fit in my suitcase so I show up looking like a good guest, that's where being able to find all the stuff on Prime is clutch.
I like to bring something small enough to travel with that still feels classy, like maybe a new apron or dish towels for the cook in the house, because that is a brave person who is hosting everyone.
Yes, I love that. Maybe even a small board game or a card game, something to keep everyone busy so they leave the cook alone to do their thing.
And the best part is you can get it all shipped to you fast before you hit the road. Prime has everything you need to travel and help everyone enjoy what they're into.
And for those that are on the couch eating leftovers, Prime even has an NFL game on Black Friday. Doesn't get any better than that.
Nice. Sitting on the couch and shopping, ding, 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 while watching football really is peak Thanksgiving.
From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into. Tell me, makes you love your dad?
No, I mean, I love my dad, yeah. But no, it's like, it makes me so happy to hear that. And yet,
And then you have a disconnect.
I have a disconnect. Why do we stop caring about women after a certain, like, really? I mean,
Yeah.
not to be political, but women, I'm going to say for me, just took a big hit. And from men and women, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that is so curious to me. How we can like look at these, be so proud of our daughters and, you know, want the best for them. And I believe that. I believe that most people want the best for their children, and half of their children are girls.
Yeah.
To me, there's just like a hypocrisy, not you, obviously, but there's a hypocrisy where it's like, oh, I got to protect my family and and then you don't.
Yeah, and this is where you and I often disagree, which is like, yes, if your conclusion is that it was an opportunity to vote for women and that was the thing that drove your voting, then it's very disheartening.
But I mean more just, well, that too, but also rights.
I personally think that it wasn't a vote on women, as much as maybe it should have been, and I voted that way, but if I just look at the exit polls, that's not what people were saying was their concern.
That's my point. That's actually my point, is it was not their concern.
But let's just be as generous as we can. If you are somebody who is having an impossible time feeding your family, and your conclusion, right or wrong, is that it's because of the left, well, feeding everyone and keeping everyone safe would trump other things. It's like first order of business is like food, shelter, and water.
Yeah.
Once we have that, then we move on to these other things. So it could be that they very much want those. Well, we know 70% of the country wants those rights for women, but they may have said to themselves, but I am more scared about my income currently, and that's got to be what I'm going to vote to. Well, and then we can disagree on what the best route to that is. To
those people who truly are like, well, again, I think there's some misinformation about what would help those people.
Sure.
But to those people who really, they're in like, I can't put food on the table. Mm-hmm. I have no judgment of those people. I don't. Right. That's a very specific situation. I am not talking about that group.
And it's, tens of millions of people.
It is, but there's a huge percentage of people that did not vote for women's rights, that do not have trouble putting food on the table, and chose to still the most generous thing I can say is chose to pick their tax dollars over women's rights. Mm-hmm. And there is just, to me, there's a disconnect between the way we think about young girls and then what happens overall. It's just, I
think people just triage their priorities, I think it's, and for you, which is totally understandable, that's number one for you on all the issues that were being voted on. That was the number one. And there's some other stuff you totally care about that went to number two. And if
Well, everything I cared about, not unfortunately, but belonged to one party.
Sure,
so I
sure,
didn't have
sure.
to make big
But
sacrifices.
let's put it this way. I do believe if you had virtually two centrist candidates on the right and the left, and on the right, they were pro-reproductive rights, and on the left, they were anti, and they wanted to extend, I think you would have flopped. You would have
100% I would.
Right. So I do think it was in the same way that for the people that are pro-life, that one always trumps all the other ones. I think we often have certain issues that trump a lot of other stuff we care about.
Yeah, just bums me out. I can really feel it. I don't know if you can sense this too, but I've been around a lot of women lately.
Yeah.
And like everyone's in a tough spot.
Yeah, I feel it.
Yeah. It's like,
Well, I talked to my ex-girlfriend, Carrie. I sent
Yeah.
you the text.
Yeah.
Then I FaceTimed her. And we haven't had a FaceTime. Like, we just check in with each other once every few months. And, or she'll send me a song she likes, or I'll send her a song. But we had a full, hour and a half FaceTime to talk about this, all these issues.
yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't need that from me normally. Like, that's not something, she's not reaching out to me to go how are you not freaking out kind of a situation, you know?
Right.
And so, yeah, I can see I see it.
Yeah. You brought this up, and I think it's right that a lot of men, young men, feel not seen or not spoken to. And I guess I'm just, to our male listeners who are in a position of influence at all, it's on you, not you, but you as a group to help these men. I don't think it's on women to do it.
It's not on women. It's on the party. The party has to have a plan for.
Yeah, but I'm saying the way to change the seed, the culture, it happens from within. And we had Sharon on, and she was like, it's not that. It's not the government that's going to come in on a white horse and change people's
With a
opinions
scroll.
and change. Exactly.
Yeah.
It comes from within.
Right.
And I was also thinking about this, speaking of daughters and fathers. Kerala, where my parents are from, is a very matriarchal society because originally it was the wealth was passed down through the female.
Yeah, local.
So there isn't this, because I was like, why doesn't my dad have this? And even my grandfather, who was much, of a old generation, he didn't have that at all.
Right.
And I was like, what is it? And I was like, oh, it's not that they're special. They didn't grow up in a patriarchal environment.
Yeah.
And it's for everyone to start moving more away from that.
Well, so much of it too is just you're kind of a product of your environment. And as Keith Payne said, it's yes, we all believe we've thought through all the issues and come to the best conclusion, but isn't it suspicious? I can predict 90% what your conclusion's going to be. I think that's relevant. And so, I don't deserve applause because I'm a feminist. I was raised by a force of nature woman, and there was no dad around. I was seeing no lowered status. I just am the lucky beneficiary of having grown up with a gangster mom.
Yeah.
And I was just on a trip with a dude who's also only dated and is now married to gangster women. And I said to him, your mom must be a gangster, was she? And he's like, oh, yeah, she's the ultimate gangster. And it's just that boy is the beneficiary of that, and I was the beneficiary of that. And that's just, we got lucky. He was born into a house
You got lucky, but also there's societal things that make it harder or easier. Like when there's equal pay, it's easier to grow up in a household where your parents are equal.
Yeah.
That's what these systemic things are about. Change, that's why we have to change some of these things, because you're absolutely right. It's what you literally are born into.
Also, some people dispute this data, but let's just say for 1 second it's true that men will date laterally and below them, and that women date laterally and above them. Yeah, or even status-wise, educational attainment, these different metrics, right? But on social dating platforms, that it's really pretty staggering. And I was like, why is that, right? Why is that? And what occurred to me is oh, yeah, for a guy who grew up in the 80s, his dad worked
Mm-hmm.
and the mom didn't work or make money and probably didn't go to college and have a degree. So like the primary love in a boy's life was this woman who probably had less status than the man on the scene. So
Yeah.
of course that makes sense. Whereas if you're a girl, dad had more status and money and power than mom, and you're trying to marry dad. So like boys are trying to marry mom and girls are trying to marry dad. So of course this pattern exists. That's exactly what you saw growing up.
Maybe for a large swath.
Uh-huh.
But for a woman who has a level of success, has hit a certain level of success, I don't think they're not looking for someone with more. That's hard. That's really rare and hard to find.
But like a lot of women would not want these are air quotes, a deadbeat boyfriend. But there's so many rich dudes that are happy to have a wife who's never done anything but look gorgeous. That's weird to me. Like how could that be? Why is that like not triggering for a guy? And that would be hugely triggering for a woman.
Most of the people in my life are with partners that are 100% on par.
Comparable, right?
They're all working. They're all working and make around the same amount of money.
I guess my conclusion's hopeful for me, which is like, oh, well, as this primary structure evolves, perhaps the baggage of both those things will go away. Like, I think this is very much product of like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s family structure, but more and more and more people have either a mom who makes the same as dad or more, or I know a ton of people here, which I didn't exist in Michigan in the 80s. There was no stay-at-home dads. I never met a single kid whose dad stayed at home. But here, I don't know what the percentage is, but all the time I'm meeting men at school who that's what they do.
Yeah.
So conceivably, their daughters aren't going to think that a guy who, that would never be an issue for them. Because the other conclusion is that it's just so bleak. Like there's the kind of, Scott Galloway, who I love so much of what he says.
Mm-hmm.
His is pretty bleak, right? Where this is just going to get exacerbated because less and less men are going to college. So less and less men are even going to achieve something laterally significant or above. So it's just going to continue to self-perpetuate, which I can see that's a very defendable position. But I'm hopeful that as people's role models and parents evolve, that it'll maybe take care of itself.
But why, what's his take on like why it would self-perpetuate? Why can't men get themselves to college anymore?
Well, they're being outperformed by girls, very simply. They're getting, now that the reins are off of girls and the shackles are off of girls, well, lo and behold, they perform better. They test better. They're more mature. There's all these things.
But I don't think it's that I don't think the stat is that boys are getting rejected from college. It's that they're not going.
No, well, in these elite schools with hard admissions, way more boys are applying than are getting in.
Yeah.
But metrically, girls are doing much better. They're getting in at a much higher rate.
Yeah. But I guess that's an outlier, right? Like trying to get into an Ivy League school. I mean, just a regular public college institution. There's no reason other than from within that group that they shouldn't be able to go. Like that's what is happening.
Can't compete.
But
what if they can't compete?
Well, I think there literally would be affirmative action for men. Like if I think that if 90% of women, if it was like every school is turning into 95%,
they're becoming
based on 5 because of merit.
Yeah, what Malcolm was saying.
Yeah.
That Tulane is becoming a women's only college.
But and then that gets into but then why? Because is it then draw more women and draw less men? That whole thing, whatever. There's so many factors to it. But there would definitely be fixes for that. Mm-hmm. Currently, I just don't know why.
Well, how about just anecdotally, your high school experience, and I'll say my high school experience. So on average, girls were much better students than the boys. Like the boys were highly distracted. They were distracting in class. I was one of them.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason they weren't before blasting boys out of the water is that they didn't apply. or they weren't expected to do that, or they weren't encouraged to do it, or they were discouraged to do it. But like once that, like when everyone's aims were the same, I'm not shocked they've blasted by boys just from sitting in classes my whole life.
Right.
Boys were kind of, you couldn't get them to fucking settle down for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening there physiologically, but I'm not shocked that now that the governor's off girls that they're doing better. That doesn't shock me at all.
Well, it's not shocking to me that they're doing better, but it doesn't explain to me why men are just dropping off the map.
I think what men are feeling is we made a very specific decision about 30 years ago where we said, okay, our economy is transitioning from a manufacturing economy to a brain economy. And we're going to invent stuff and we're going to administrate and we're going to do all this stuff. And then, so NAFTA is a very appealing policy because we're not going to be manufacturing anymore. It'd be better to get cheap labor in Mexico. And a lot of decisions were made to pursue that goal of a brain economy. And we have the results. So I think, at least when I was going to high school, in fact, I can tell you a month or two ago, I said I reconnected with him, Joey Riccardi. Joey Riccardi wasn't a good student. His dad was a bricklayer. He had a work ethic like no one's business. He owns this incredible excavation company now, and he's done incredibly well. Yeah. He was not going to go to college.
Yeah.
There used to be a lot more avenues like that. The trades were bigger. I'm from Detroit. Like most people went into manufacturing and they had great lives and they had ski boats and, so that has really fallen out. So that's a real issue.
It is a real issue. But in the same way that when we talk about AI here, and if I say like, well, I think we should put regulations, and you're like, well, we can't because we have to compete with these other countries. They're not going to stop.
And I say that not because I don't agree with you. I say that because I think I'm working backwards from a reality. I don't think we should do that.
Yes, so I'm making the same equivalency. Like if we said we're not going to be a brain economy, how the fuck are we going to compete with China and India and these other countries that are full brain economy?
But luckily we have some models. So it's like Germany's doing both things. Germany is leading in tech and in engineering, and yet they also have this huge manufacturing base. I don't think they're leading in tech.
Germany isn't leading in tech.
Okay, they're a very high-tech civilization.
Yeah.
And they have their own stock market. That's, they have all the things we have. They're kind of winning on both fronts, and they've made a lot of legislative decisions that the skilled when you're in school, they drive you if you're a boy to a vocational school.
Yeah, I think that's very smart.
And you pick up an actual trade there that you will make $45 an hour. Like you'll be a middle class, whether they're unionized or not, they just culturally.
Yeah.
I think because we have at least a model of it where it works, where you can have both things, you can have a brain economy and a manufacturing economy. I think we need to do a lot better.
I do too, but so that's sort of, how do we get those people to hear? Because this is the truth. The party that wants to do that, the party that wants to do free community college, to offer retraining and vocational skills, is not the party they're voting for. So I don't know how to get those people to understand that what is in their best interest and this country's best interest of actual training that group to be middle class or above. And there is an avenue for that.
Now, look, some of these things are dog whistles. I'll totally agree with you. But it's very simple messaging. It's like 2016, Trump's the only person in America that's like fighting for coal jobs. We got to get into green energy.
But what else did she say? And so we have to retrain. Hillary said retrain. I heard it so many times.
Yeah.
Retraining. And that's correct.
But listen, you can totally disagree with it on an environmental stance. But you had one side saying we're going to get into green energy, which is a very high-tech energy. It's all happening in Silicon Valley. It's like the solar panel companies, the wind turbine companies. And then you have oil and gas drilling, which is North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota. All these places where dudes are roughnecks and they can go make $60 an hour. And that thing they can do. Solar and wind sounds like that's never going to be for them. But coal mining and gas and oil, which the right is very in favor of gas and oil, and the left's very against gas and oil. you just got to acknowledge that's a whole sector of jobs that a lot of these guys were going to have. And they think that one side wants to get rid of all those jobs, the last of their high-paying jobs. If you can just table the environmental aspect for a second, I understand the appeal of that. That's not like hard for me to get. Is one side saying, I'm going to protect all these jobs that the left says are too dirty for the world. And the other side is saying, we're going to green, which is high tech in Silicon Valley. That all makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot simpler to understand than
the reality.
Something more complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Here we go.
So this is for Matt Murphy.
Oh, this was a fun one.
Yeah. The percentage of DNA that we share with chimps, 98.8%.
Almost our temperature.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be my new way of remembering it.
Okay, great. Blood alcohol levels. His mom was 5. And 0.08 is the legal limit. So that's really bad.
Oh,
really,
that's
really
insane.
bad.
That's insane.
Very bad. On the Wondery Plus episode,
yeah,
we do a little fact check now for the Wondery Plus episode. So for the Matt Murphy Wondery Plus episode, the facts are a little different. They're the same, but they're different because I found a different fact.
Oh, wow. You keep going.
Yeah, because in that episode, I said that Kevin Spacey is currently in a play and he's not.
He's not.
No.
Okay.
But
he's unemployed currently?
Well, I guess he's set to appear in a movie, Peter 5'8".
Okay.
And where he got the standing ovation, it was at a theater in Oxford, which is why I guess I was confused. It says his first stage appearance since being cleared of sexual assault after performing a brief scene by Shakespeare. So he just did a scene.
A little one-off.
Exactly. He did a 5-minute scene.
And that received a standing ovation.
I guess so. All right. So he's not currently in a play.
Okay. There was a standing O last night.
Oh, that's nice.
Do you call it a standing O?
I used to, yeah.
No, you're off of it. Am I doing something dorky?
I haven't said it in a while. It's
Okay.
I love it.
Go ahead. It's a little dorky.
No, it's fine. Okay. You said 25% of boys are molested-ish. And the last time we talked about this, I was like, yes, I found that stat. Now that stat's gone.
They took it off the internet?
Yes, it's gone. And what's left is 1 in 6. I guess that's this big number. And then there's a site called 1in6.org. Then all these other places are saying 1 in 6. I looked a lot for the other thing and I couldn't find it. And I kept finding 1 in 6.
One could be data from today and one could be data from the 80s. Like I'm always referencing Body Keeps a Score. Yeah, and that stuff was all about the generation in the 80s.
But one is data from today and the other is data from last week.
Oh, no, I don't have an explanation for that. But I could see where from my generation to my kids that it has dropped.
Yeah.
Also, that's nuts.
If
you're at a football game and you're looking at those many thousands of people and you're saying 1 of every 6 people you see.
It's awful.
It's crazy.
Okay.
That's more than that have been in a traffic accident.
Yeah.
I don't know those stats. But.
Okay, so are you more likely to be sexually abusive if you were sexually abused? Again, some conflicting info. There's stopitnow.org, which we talked about. Stopitnow.org says, no, you're not more likely to be. There is a study by the NIH. Among 747 males, the risk of being a perpetrator was positively correlated with reported sexual abuse victim experiences. The overall rate of having been a victim was 35% for perpetrators and 11% for non-perpetrators. Of the 96 females, 43% had been victims, but only 1 was a perpetrator. A high percentage of male subjects abused in childhood by a female relative became perpetrators. Having been a victim was a strong predictor of becoming a perpetrator, as was an index of parental loss in childhood. And that is all.
Well, I love you. This was fun.
Yeah.
You rose to the occasion of your barette.
Thank you. I rose to the occasion.
Yes.
It's a rose.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord. All right. Love you.
Love you.